Brace yourself, everyone, because we're about to discuss the most famous cursed items around the globe. This vintage cutie has inspired some well-known Hollywood horror movies, but the real-life demon doll can be a lot more frightening than fake jump scares on the screen. In 1970, a young student nurse named Donna Jennings received a Raggedy Ann doll as a birthday gift. Her mother found this toy at an antique shop. Soon, Donna noticed that the doll appeared to move around the house on its own from places where she left it. But she didn't get rid of it until the situation got way worse. Donna's boyfriend began to mysteriously receive claw marks on his chest when he had sleepovers in her house. The family called famed demonologists Elizabeth and Ed Warren, who agreed to investigate that mystery. The couple claimed that the doll had all signs of demonic possession. They locked it in a specially made glass cabinet in their occult museum in Connecticut. To keep the evil powers under control, they regularly read prayers. Of course, demonology can hardly be called a classic science, but unfortunately, classic scientists were not brave enough to take the doll into a lab for testing. And while we're talking about creepy dolls, we can't skip this gentleman. Robert the Evil Doll is known to have caused several incidents, ranging from car accidents to divorces. In 1904, Robert Eugene Otto received this toy for his birthday. He belonged to a prominent Key West family. Some reports claim that his grandfather brought this souvenir from Germany. Others say it was gifted by one of the maids. Soon, the family began to notice the doll knocking furniture over during the night, teleporting, and even talking. The housemaids claimed to hear Otto having a conversation with the doll alone, in two distinct voices. When Otto passed away, a couple bought the house, and eventually, their 8-year-old daughter found Robert the doll in the attic. Soon, she complained to her parents that the toy was evil and tried to attack her. Thankfully, today the doll is locked in a glass box. It's displayed in a museum in Key West, but it's still believed to curse people. So, if you ever want to go see it, take your time to research the safety rules. This modest wedding dress is not so innocent as it seems. It belonged to Anna Baker, the only daughter of a wealthy merchant. They lived in a fancy mansion in Altoona, USA. Anna's father wanted her to marry into an influential and rich family. But Anna fell in love with an ordinary iron worker, and they agreed to escape together. She purchased this dress for her upcoming secret wedding. But her father discovered their plans and ruined them. He forcefully locked Anna in her bedroom. She swore not to marry anyone else and spent the rest of her life alone. When her father passed away, Anna got out of the house and visited her former fiancé just to see him living happily ever after with another woman. Anna was very disappointed, so she continued living as a hermit in the family mansion. Her maids would often find Anna dancing around the house dressed in her unused wedding gown. After Anna passed away, the mansion turned into a museum, and the wedding dress is now part of the exhibition. Many visitors claim to see the dress moving inside the glass box, as if it was dancing. Skeptics tried to find logical reasons causing the movement, but they failed to find any traces of wind or any other explanation. The dress is also known to put visitors into some sort of trance and make them see the phantom of Anna dancing around the house. Would you dare to try it on? The next cursed object is also associated with a sad love story. The so-called Bassano vase was crafted of silver in the 15th century in a small Italian town. It was supposed to be a wedding gift for a young bride delivered to her anonymously before the wedding. But unfortunately, the bride didn't make it to the wedding. When she didn't show up, locals began to look for her. They found the bride breathless on the floor with the vase clutched tightly in her cold hands. This tragic event was never explained. The silver vase was then passed on from one family to another, and according to the legend, each owner of this weird artifact lost their life. Then the vase disappeared and was rediscovered again in the 1980s. It's said that a young man dug the vase up in his backyard. The details of this discovery vary from story to story, but they say he also found a creepy note. It said that the vase might cause a fatal outcome, but the man just ignored the grim warning and sold the treasure at an auction. Mysterious tragedies continued as the vase traveled from one household to another. Finally, it was offered to multiple museums, but all of them refused to deal with it because of its bad reputation. It remains unclear where exactly the vase is now, but some say it's hidden in a box underground in an inaccessible place. So, if you ever dig this thing up in your backyard, be careful. The Hands Resist Him is known as one of the most haunted paintings in art history. Those who saw it claimed that the characters in the picture move or disappear in the nighttime. According to the artist, Bill Stoneham, this piece represents the doorway that connects the world of dreams and reality. Stoneham first presented his creation to the public in California back in the early 1970s. According to reports, the gallery owner, the art critic, and the buyer passed away soon after coming into contact with the painting. After that, no one knew where the painting was for years before one family found it completely abandoned in a brewery building. And in 2000, they decided to auction it online. Soon the painting became a meme because it had a spooky disclaimer saying that it carried some form of curse. The seller claimed that the main character crawled out from the canvas at nighttime. The potential buyer had to sign an agreement absolving the seller from all liability. Nevertheless, the painting was sold for about $1,000, and its new owner didn't report any spooky events so far. But the auction page was viewed over 30,000 times, and many people claimed that simply viewing the photos of the painting made them feel sick or have unpleasant experiences. Here's another haunted painting, The Crying Boy, created by Italian artist Giovanni Bragolin. This work was mass-produced in the 1950s and gained fame worldwide. Gloomy rumors began to spread soon after multiple homes with this particular painting across the UK caught fire. But the most mysterious part is that no matter how severe the fire was, the painting each time remained undamaged. Some say those fires were just a coincidence, but still, nobody has yet found any scientific explanation for why the paintings are so indestructible. Just take a look at this solid packaging. Why in the world would someone need to seal a vial in such a massive plastic cube? It must be really dangerous. A few years ago, some viral rumors around the internet claimed that this substance scares the life out of scientists. But in fact, the vial contains a tiny fragment of a Zagami meteorite from Mars. Found in Nigeria in 1962, it became famous for being the largest single Mars meteorite ever found on Earth. Its full weight amounts to 40 pounds. According to the legend, coming in contact with this tiny piece of Mars was enough to cause fatal consequences. But don't worry, it's just a myth. Usually meteorites are even less radioactive than typical Earth rocks. Bad news, meteorites probably can't give you superpowers. But the good news is that they're not dangerous, unless you're touching them while they're piercing the atmosphere at the speed of 44 miles per second. And as for the plastic cube, it was created as a convenient packaging to sell Zagami fragments to private collectors. And speaking of rocks, it's better to think twice before taking small fragments home as a travel souvenir. This epic sandstone formation is Uluru Rock. Located in the Northern Territory of Australia, this place is considered sacred by the locals. That's why they advise visitors not to sneak anything from the site. But many fearless tourists ignore their recommendations. Those who brought home small chunks of the rock reported experiencing sickness, bad luck, terrible breakups, and even fatal events. According to reports, many people who removed Uluru fragments attempted to mail them back to various agencies, trying to remove the perceived curse.
April 14th, 1912. A cold evening somewhere in the North Atlantic. On board the most modern and unsinkable ship, the Titanic, a dinner is held. Two well-dressed men are sitting at one of the tables. One of them is a famous British journalist. He tells his interlocutor an interesting and at the same time terrible story. It all started about 1000 BCE in ancient Egypt. At that time, one woman was born in the city of Thebes. No one knew who she was or what she did, but she had a high social standing. Towards the end of her life, she was proclaimed a priestess in the college of Amen-Ra. Her body was embalmed, placed in a wooden casket, and covered with a massive lid bearing the image of a woman and mysterious inscriptions. She was buried in Thebes along with other people of the upper class. The mummy of this woman lay at rest for almost 3,000 years. The burial place had been carefully hidden. Around the first half of the 19th century, a group of locals accidentally discovered the ancient tomb. They disturbed the peace of the priestess. No one knows exactly what happened that day, but the mummy was removed from the casket and disappeared without a trace. A few decades later, a group of 4 wealthy friends from England came to Egypt for a trip across the upper part of the Nile. First, they went to visit the excavations of the Temple of Amen-Ra near the city of Luxor. There, they found the empty mummy case. It depicted the priestess with dark eyes looking into the void. There was something sinister in her gaze. They didn't know who the case belonged to, but they were so amazed by the beauty and energy of that find that they decided to buy it from the locals. The buyer disappeared the same night before the case was delivered to him at the hotel. Some said they'd seen the man leave the hotel and go towards the desert. No one knew why he did it. No one else saw him afterwards. Another man from the same group took the casket. During their return home, one of the friends was seriously injured. After arriving in London, the new case owner discovered the bank where all his money was placed had gone bankrupt. In one day, the man turned from a wealthy businessman into a beggar. A third friend also experienced the sinister influence of the ancient find. He lost his health, job, and eventually even his life in an accident shortly after returning to London. Before going bankrupt, the owner gave the ancient casket to his sister who lived in London. One of the friends of this woman came into the room, saw the Egyptian artifact, and immediately felt the dangerous energy emanating from it. Then the owner's sister gave the case to a famous photographer. He took some photos and was horrified. According to his words, he saw a real priestess with a human face in the photos. She looked at him with an ominous, icy gaze. No one except the photographer touched the film of the camera. No one changed the photo. Shortly after, the photographer mysteriously went missing. From that point, the story becomes vague. According to one version, the owner's sister gave the artifact to the British Museum. The man who transported the case passed away soon after, and his assistant got into a terrible accident. Another version says that the item from the Egyptian tomb was bought by a rich businessman. After that, 3 members of his family also had an accident, and his house burned down. Convinced the mummy case was cursed, he gave it to the British Museum. The interlocutor listens to the story with such interest that he forgot about dinner, which has gone cold. "How did you know all this?" he asks. The journalist replies he has been studying everything related to the mummy and its owners for several months. He found evidence of all the accidents and put together the full picture. "So, what happened next?" the interlocutor asks. It seems the mummy case should find peace in the museum. The priestess was surrounded by other kings and queens from different times. However, there was no peace. Scientists and ancient languages experts tried to decipher the symbols on the case. They found out that most of the inscriptions meant curses and misfortunes addressed to those who'd dare to disturb the peace of the priestess. Every night, the guards and museum staff heard the knocking coming from the mummy case. The knocking was accompanied by crying and screaming. Also, Someone scattered other exhibits all over the hall every night. Everyone soon came to believe that the priestess's spirit continued to use magic forces. Then, one private collector became interested in the case. He bought it from the museum, not for his collection, but to try to expel the spirit of the mummy from the artifact. It's not known in what ways he tried to do this, but he failed. Then, he managed to sell the mummy case to a rich American archaeologist. That guy decided to move the mummy to New York. And what? What happened next? The interlocutor asks with interest. That's it. End of story, the journalist answers. What do you mean? What happened to the mummy? Where is it now? The journalist looks at the interlocutor with some excitement. She's here. She's on the Titanic, he says. The interlocutor looks scared and confused. But the journalist confirms the sarcophagus is here. He doesn't doubt it because he saw it with his own eyes. After dinner, they go to their cabins. The journalist lies down but can't help thinking about the mummy. He tries to convince himself that everything he has found out about the priestess is a myth. There is no curse. The moment he finally falls asleep, he feels a slight push. A few minutes later, a crew member knocks on his cabin door. He informs that all passengers must go to the upper deck because something has happened to the ship. The journalist goes out into the fresh air and sees a huge crowd of people. There's no panic yet. Someone says that something has happened to the engine. Others say it's just a precaution. The journalist immediately understands everything. The ship is sinking. The priestess did it. In less than an hour, the Titanic completely went underwater. One legend says the priestess influenced the captain of the ship. The crew members didn't dare to put such a valuable cargo in the hold. Therefore, they placed the box with the artifact near the captain's bridge. On that fateful night, the captain decided to look at the casket with his own eyes. After that, his behavior became weird. They said the spirit clouded his mind. When the ship entered the territory filled with icebergs, he refused to slow down, despite the requests of the crew. The sarcophagus may still lie at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean even now, with the priestess finally having found her peace. Okay, this story is nothing more than a legend. There's no record or evidence that the Titanic was carrying any kind of mummy or sarcophagus. The legend appeared a couple of years after the disaster. At that time, there were many theories about what happened to the Titanic. The ship sank because of secret agencies. ETs attacked the Titanic. The Titanic was sunk specifically to get money for the insurance company. Such crazy theories were very popular among audiences. One of these theories was developed by a well-known newspaper. Journalists published an article about the cursed mummy on board the Titanic. The rest picked up the legend and it became popular. One of the reasons why people believe in such things is hidden in human psychology. Any fake legend tells something secret, things that people don't or shouldn't know about. When a person reads this, they feel special because now they know a terrible secret. This sense of self-importance is the reason for the popularity of conspiracy theories. Well, it is also important to note that all these theories are really interesting. By the way, the mummy from this story actually exists, and it's in the British Museum. More precisely, there's only a wooden lid from the sarcophagus with the image of a woman. It's still unknown who it belonged to. The identity of the last owner is also unknown. It's only known the exhibit was transferred to the museum at the end of the 19th century. There, she was called the Unlucky Mummy. The museum staff reports that it doesn't bring any misfortunes. The screams and knocking from the lid are just a myth. You can come and see the exhibit yourself with your own eyes, if you dare, of course. Hello, brave visitor, and welcome to the exhibition of the uncanny. But beware, this is going to be one chilling experience for you. Even Sabrina the Witch couldn't handle these photos. Now, if you've got what it takes to jump into the tunnel of oddities, let's begin. The first photo will take you back to 1900s Belfast. It shows 15 females who were workers at a linen mill. If you calculate how many hands 15 people have, it makes 30, right? But take a good look at the photo, and you'll see there's an extra hand that doesn't belong to any of the ladies there. All the women are arranged in rows with their arms crossed over their chests and hands tucked underneath their arms. There is only one exception to that, and it's the lady in the second row with one hand on her hip and the other down by her side. That's one little rebel you got there. But the mysterious claw-like hand is neither hers nor does it belong to someone close to her. It's actually resting on the shoulder of a girl on the other side of the same row. And there's no one else who the hand could belong to. Even though it's a century old, the photograph first appeared on the internet on April 29, 2016. It was sent to one website by a woman named Linda, who identified the girl with the hand on her shoulder as her grandmother, Ellen Donnelly. But she never commented on who that hand might belong to. What's even weirder is that there's no evidence whatsoever that suggests that the photo was digitally altered. So where did this lonely hand come from? Photoshop didn't exist back then. But this doesn't mean photographers didn't have the necessary skills to edit their photos. Although it was not possible to add an extra hand to the photo, it was surely possible to remove any unwanted objects or people by simply cutting them out with scissors. Photographers would then draw what they wanted to be in the picture in pencil or charcoal. They could also combine multiple negatives to create a single image. There's one more answer to where the hand could have come from. Even though instantaneous photography had already existed in the 1900s, some photographers still use the long exposure technique to capture the moment. So it is possible that while the photo was being taken, the lady in the back initially placed her hands on Ellen and then decided to cross her arms, which makes this terrifying photo the result of long camera exposure. So you can ease your mind that it was not Thing, the hand that lived with the Addams family, that photobombed this picture. Now in our second photo, you'll see a young lady holding a glowing apparition between her hands. It might also make it easy for you to believe that magic is real. But sorry to disappoint you, because that is not the Expelliarmus spell she's doing. The woman in the photo is French-born Martha Baron, who later changed her name to Eva Carrera. She lived between 1886 and 1943. She was a fraudulent medium. She claimed to have psychic abilities that allowed her to communicate with people who had passed over to the other side and make their spirits materialize during her seances. At the time, such lying mediums would follow a standard procedure during their seances. They would enter a closet installed in the room to pretend to concentrate. Then they could use their powers at full capacity to generate ectoplasm. When not used in the context of cell biology, ectoplasm is a term referring to an imaginary substance that would come out of the body of the medium. It then might take the shape of a face, a hand, or even the entire body of the person who's being called back to life. Eva Carrera was one of those dishonest mediums who would use chewed paper and cut out faces from magazines and newspapers to make fake ectoplasm. This photo of hers, taken in 1912 by German parapsychological researcher Albert von Schrenck-Nozick, shows her in action during one of such deceptive seances. But knowing the full story doesn't change the fact that this photo can make your hair stand on end. But what's even more unbelievable than the photo itself is the fact that she was able to convince big names like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of the Sherlock Holmes mystery series, that she was the real thing. But you'll be happy to know that she couldn't trick illusionist and escape artist Harry Houdini, who, unlike Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, thought her performances were nothing more than a magician's tricks. Now, these owls in the third photo are not Hogwarts owls, and they are not here to bring you your acceptance letter. This photo was taken in the 1920s outside the Manchester Grammar School, which was founded all the way back in 1515 by a man named Hugh Oldham. and he is the reason why these people are wearing weird owl costumes as they're marching. Hugh Oldham was born in Manchester. He wasn't a serious scholar, despite attending both Oxford and Cambridge universities. Well, the tuition was cheaper then. However, he was in royal service, and thanks to his administrative skills, he was favored with important titles. That is what actually helped him reach high positions and become a powerful and influential figure. And through his new duties, he was able to achieve great wealth, which he later used to fund the school. The motto of Oldham's school, which is written on its coat of arms, is the Latin phrase sapere aude, which loosely translates to dare to be wise. To this day, the school still has that same motto, but the choice of the owl doesn't symbolize wisdom as you might think. The owl on the Manchester Grammar School's badge is carrying a banner with the word dome on it. If you read it as one would read emojis, you would arrive at owldom, which is actually a reference to Hugh Oldham. When you look at the crest of the town of Oldham, you'll see it's very similar to that of the school. This choice was made to reflect the pronunciation of Oldham in the local accent, which is owldom. Accordingly, paying respects to their founding father is why both the school's and the town's mascot is the owl. So, rest assured that nothing sinister and spooky is going on in this photo. Now, how about something sweet after all that eerie stuff? The fourth photo depicts an innocent child whose eyes are screaming, "Help me!" But don't worry, the boogeyman is not the one holding him. The thing he seems to be sitting on is actually his mother. This is called hidden mother photography, and it was actually very common in the Victorian era. Back in the 1840s, the only way people could have their photos taken was with a daguerreotype camera, which was the first photographic camera developed for commercial use. These cameras had exposure times from tens of seconds to several minutes. So, one had to stay perfectly still during all that time to get a clear picture. But, as you can imagine, it's not easy for a child, let alone me, to stay motionless for such a long period of time. And you can't say, strike a pose to a baby either. So, this is the reason why the hidden mother technique was born. Children would be photographed with their mothers present, but mommy would also have to be hidden within the frame. To achieve that, they would often stand behind curtains, under cloaks or blankets, or act as chairs. Sometimes photographers would also remove parts of photographs where moms were visible. Wow, the hardships mothers have to go through for their children. Boy, that hasn't changed. Some of the photos turned out quite well, but some of them ended up looking nightmarish. This practice continued to be used up until the 1920s. But as cameras became faster, there was no need for moms to hide anywhere. At least until photobombing became a thing. Oh, you love yourself more than anyone else. You have no doubts about your beauty. You're sure that you are prettier, smarter, and more charming than others. You're the best. The only person you look at with adoration is you in the mirror. So congrats, you probably have narcissism. The word that describes this unusual mental condition appeared in ancient times. According to Greek mythology, the name Narcissus belonged to some fascinating character. His story can teach you that too much self-love can cause too many problems. There are reasons why people behave narcissistically, but before we know them, let's take a look at the myth. So, there are several versions of Narcissus' stories. He was the son of two mythological creatures. When he was born, a fortune teller told his parents, "Your son will stay alive until he sees himself." So, smartly, they removed all mirrors and reflective objects from the house. Narcissus was a handsome young man. Everyone admired his beauty. Local nymphs and girls were in love with him. But Narcissus didn't like anyone. He liked to walk in the forest, eat fruit, and listen to birds singing. And then, one day, a nymph named Echo saw him walking amongst flowers and trees. She fell in love with him right at that second. After a while, she told him about her feelings, but Narcissus rejected her. It broke Echo's heart. She ran away and hid in the depths of the forest. She couldn't drink and eat because of such sadness, So she passed away. The only thing that remained after her was her voice. It echoed through the trees and bushes. And then someone named Nemesis heard it. She was outraged that Narcissus had rejected the nymph. She decided to punish him, so Nemesis made him fall in love with himself. Wow, Nemesis, Narcissus, this could get confusing. Anyway, one day Narcissus saw his reflection in the pond and couldn't take his eyes off. He looked at himself in love for many weeks until life left him since he didn't drink and eat anything all this time. Oops. Narcissus disappeared but left behind a beautiful flower near the pond. They called this flower after his name. Well, I guess that's better than being called Potsy. Now, in another version, Hera punished the nymph Echo for one misconduct related to Zeus. Hey, you gotta be up on your Greek gods and stuff. Hera made it impossible for her to speak normally, so from that moment, she could only repeat what she heard. If you had asked her, "Hey, is it a bird or a dinosaur?" she would have answered, "Hey, is it a bird or a dinosaur?" Yeah, that could get annoying. Echo didn't want to live with such a curse, so she hid in a dark cave. She decided to live there till the end of her days. A little time had passed, and then she noted Narcissus walking by. Well, the nymph immediately found a new meaning in life as she fell in love with the young man. But how to confess your feelings? She couldn't talk to him normally. Therefore, Echo decided to ask the forest for help. She had some magic abilities that allowed her to control animals and trees. She used birds and leaves of trees to somehow share her feelings with Narcissus. The young man immediately realized the nymph was in love with him. But he did say no without hesitation. He was too interested in himself and didn't want to share such a person with someone else. Or maybe he liked nobody at all. Perhaps he was looking for his ideal of beauty that didn't exist in nature. The already unhappy Echo became even sadder. She returned to her cave and began to cry. She couldn't eat and drink. She decided that she would stay here forever. In the last days, Echo asked Nemesis to restore justice and punish Narcissus for his arrogance. Nemesis deprived him of the opportunity to love someone else and forced him to love only himself. And then, one hot day, Narcissus went to the pond to cool down a little. He bent on his knees to drink some water and saw the reflection. At that moment, the prophetess's words came true. Narcissus was so amazed by his beauty that he couldn't take his eyes off the pond surface. He got so caught up, he kept himself from eating or drinking. The water was in front of him, but he didn't quench his thirst because the beauty wasn't letting him go. Wow, there's a whole lot of starving going on over somebody's good looks. Anyway, Narcissus bent down so low that he fell into the water and never surfaced again. The nymphs of the forest couldn't find him. Many women grieved. A beautiful flower with white petals appeared on the river shore. They named it after the handsome young man. While the nymphs mourned him on earth, Narcissus was in the underworld, and even there he couldn't stop admiring himself. Narcissus was doomed to look at his reflection in the river Styx for an eternity. It was like a daze. This self-love hypnotized him. The eternal gaze in his reflection made him infinitely unhappy and happy at the same time. Such a character causes no sympathy, since people don't like narcissistic personalities. But another version of the famous legend justifies the young man's actions. A famous Greek traveler and geographer wrote in one of his books, Description of Greece, Narcissus had a beautiful twin sister. They looked like 2 drops of water. And one terrible day, she passed away. Grief broke Narcissus's heart, but then he saw his reflection and couldn't take his eyes off it. But not because he fell in love with himself, but because his face reminded him of his sister. He looked at himself because he didn't want to part with her again. Yeah, this story seems sadder, but in any case, these are all myths that give us an accurate description of a specific type of person's personality. All narcissists always think about their success, splendor, beauty, and some perfect love with ideal persons. They're sure they're unique and better than other people. They want to communicate only with those with the same high level of uniqueness. Narcissists live in a fantasy world about their greatness. There's nothing wrong if people love themselves, but sometimes this love becomes too strong. It's challenging to have a relationship with narcissists because they concentrate only on themselves and don't have empathy. They can't read other people's feelings. You're crying after watching a sad movie, but a narcissist is ill-equipped for understanding your emotions. But with all these negative qualities, narcissists are very charming people. It's always fun with them, and they know how to make you laugh and get your attention. If a person loves himself, then he becomes attractive to others. Do you want to jump with a parachute? No problem. Hey, it's a bigger problem if you jump without one. How about you fly to another country right now? Sure, why not? It's all cool. But then you realize that it's challenging to be friends with this person because you can't share joy, sadness, and other feelings. Now, don't think that narcissists have complex character because they're not good people and they like it. Such a personality grows over the years, but it all starts at an early age. Imagine that your parents praise you from the day of your birth only for your achievements and appearance. Did you win the swimming competition? Great! Have you passed the exam? Perfect! You're so handsome, your parents tell you. Good job! You'll become a good doctor or a firefighter or a lawyer. Sounds cool, doesn't it? But what about your inner state, your feelings? If no one sees it in you, then you won't be able to appreciate it in other people. You'll pay attention only to your superiority and a sense of success because your parents loved you only for this. Ultimately, you will also appreciate others for these qualities. If you're as popular and successful, and even more fantastic, narcissists will pay attention to you. Perhaps the mythological parents of the narcissist character admired his beauty so much that they forgot about the moral formation of their son. Any person needs the support of inner emotions and state to prevent forming an emotional void inside. Narcissistic people try to fill it with a sense of admiration and praise, but these things can't replace love. That's why so many narcissists suffer inside. Fortunately, modern advances in psychology can help get rid of narcissism. The doctor tries to guide the patient through the feelings and emotions they experienced in the distant past. They try to find the reasons that made them a narcissist. It's a long and complex therapy, but it is pretty effective. It's difficult to make a person who admires him or herself to go through it. If they agree to the therapy, they admit that something is wrong with them. And such recognition is a challenging test to those who love themselves too much.
Have you heard of Göbekli Tepe? It's an ancient site in Turkey that literally made historians rewrite history books. Over 11,000 years ago, a group of prehistoric humans crafted an enigmatic masterpiece that's even older than Stonehenge. Before its discovery, archaeologists believed that people didn't know about iron and weren't good at making pottery. They were sure that settled life only emerged with the need for agriculture. But Göbekli Tepe changed this belief. The place has revealed that it was the temple that paved the way for a settled life, not agriculture. Until this discovery, researchers believed that farming was the catalyst for sedentary living. Meet Professor Schmidt, the guy whose findings changed this theory. He managed to prove that hunter-gatherer communities laid the very foundations of this way of life. Back in the 1960s, other archaeologists visited the area, but they totally missed the mark. While surveying the region, they stumbled upon a hill with scattered limestone slabs and concluded it was just an old burial ground from medieval times. Little did they know that there was so much more to uncover. In 1994, Schmidt embarked on his own survey of prehistoric sites in the area. Surprise! He instantly realized he had discovered something truly extraordinary. Unlike the nearby flat and barren plateaus, Göbekli Tepe had a gently rounded top, rising 50 feet above the surrounding landscape. Funny enough, the translation of this place's name is Potbelly Hill. Schmidt was sure only humans could have made something like this. Those broken limestone pieces that were mistaken for gravestones turned out to be way more exciting. It was like stumbling upon a hidden treasure. The pieces took on a whole new meaning, and Schmidt with his team was about to dive into the secrets waiting beneath the surface. To their surprise, they found no traces of a settlement. No hearths for cooking, no houses, and none of those adorable clay figurines commonly found in nearby sites of similar age. However, they uncovered that those ancient people used tools like stone hammers. So, Schmidt and his team put their heads together and took a wild guess at the age of Göbekli Tepe's stone structures. Their estimation got backed up by some limited carbon dating done right at the site. The ancient vibes of this place were finally starting to make sense. It was like a puzzle slowly coming together. You may think that back then, people didn't have special tools to create something as cool as Göbekli Tepe. Not true. Turns out, these prehistoric folks used flint tools instead of fancy metal chisels. They were also skilled at chipping away softer limestone and crafting pillars right on the spot. Afterward, they carried the pillars a short distance to the summit and placed them upright. Once the stone rings were complete, they covered them with layers of dirt. Over time, they added new rings, and voila! You've got a cool hill to impress people in the future. During their first year of excavation, the team went through 15,000 pieces of animal bones from wild creatures. These people didn't have pet animals or grow their own food. They hunted wild animals for their meals. But things were about to change, because the place had everything they needed to start farming. Scientists say they had wild sheep and wild grains that could be domesticated. And guess what? Just 20 miles away, geneticists found evidence of the world's oldest domesticated strains of wheat at a prehistoric village. These amazing findings have completely changed how we view civilization. In the past, experts believed that people needed to learn how to farm and settle in one place before they could build temples and develop complex societies. But guess what? Schmidt's research flips that idea on its head. He claims that the incredible effort put into constructing these astonishing structures actually set the stage for the development of advanced societies. It means that societal and cultural changes happened before agriculture. Schmidt has this fascinating hypothesis about Göbekli Tepe. He thinks it could have been a special burial site where people left their loved ones. And here's the twist. The burial site was adorned with fancy statues and symbols representing deities from the spiritual realm. The idea that Göbekli Tepe could have served as a sacred place adds another layer of complexity to the whole story. While the site's true purpose may remain elusive, Schmidt's insights invite us to consider the profound interplay between life and the afterlife, and the deep reverence ancient hunter-gatherer societies may have had for their departed ancestors. Now let's talk about the stars of the show, the mesmerizing T-shaped columns that dominate Göbekli Tepe. These mysterious structures range from 10 to 20 feet tall and most likely represent stylized human figures. But one figure stands out from the rest, the three-dimensional lion relief. This depiction really fires up our imagination. Why? Because it hints at the possibility that lions roamed Anatolia during the Neolithic period. These standing stones are arranged in circles and placed in rectangular pits. Each circle has a similar setup. Two big T-shaped pillars in the center, surrounded by slightly smaller ones facing inward. Talk about a stylish arrangement. These towering pillars reach a whopping 16 feet and weigh between 7 and 10 tons. Some pillars are plain and simple, while others are like works of art with intricate carvings. Foxes, scorpions, and vultures come to life, crawling and twisting on the pillars' sides. But it's not just animals depicted on these stones. Some pillars have abstract shapes representing humans, and even small carvings of clothing items. Some of them even have belts. Now, there's one pillar that stands out from the rest like a rock star. This super old stone pillar suggests that a comet crashed into Earth. It happened during a chilly period that lasted about 1,000 years. Previous studies examining Greenland ice cores hinted at this comet theory, but now the carvings at Göbekli Tepe prove it right. The carvings on the pillars are like a historical comic strip. They even show a headless human figure. Researchers fed the images into a computer and discovered their connections to constellations, indicating that this temple might have been an ancient observatory. It's It's like our ancestors were trying to document this cataclysmic event in their own unique way. Archaeologists have been excavating and researching Göbekli Tepe since the mid-1990s, peeling back layers of history and providing us with a deeper understanding of the intricate relationship between various elements. They have no plans to stop the whole process for another 150 years. Who knows what else they'll find? You see, Göbekli Tepe has been labeled purely as a ritual site with no signs of domestic activities. We were led to believe that the absence of water meant it couldn't support semi-sedentary communities. But scientists believe it's time to shake things up and approach Göbekli Tepe with fresh eyes. It's time to question what we believed before and use new evidence and different ways of thinking. Like, there might have been a group of people living in the area who didn't stay in one place all the time. They moved around a bit but still had their own civilization, living in the area semi-sedentarily. Göbekli Tepe is not just home to a single temple, but an astounding collection of over 20 ancient structures. As archaeologists delve into the depths of this wonder, they are unraveling its unique layout, featuring two prominent focal points at the heart of each establishment, complemented by smaller structures and dividing walls. What's even crazier is that in this area, there are over 200 obelisks, which are narrow tapering monuments.
Now, have you ever seen cricket balls that are 3 billion years old? Klerksdorp spheres were found in deposits of the mineral pyrophyllite in South Africa and rock the science world. They do look like tiny ancient cricket balls with seams-like lines around the middle. Back in the 1980s, some folks claimed these spheres had been made by an advanced pre-flood civilization we know nothing about. One museum curator shared stories about how they rotated on their own in a display case. There was also a TV show that invited a psychic who declared the spheres were pieces of an ancient spaceship. But according to geologists, these spheres are actually pretty common concretions or spherical objects formed by different minerals than the surrounding rock. The seam-like lines are just imprints from the host rock's layers building up over time. The Klerksdorp spheres come in different shapes, from noticeably flattened spheres to distinct discs. As for that episode when one of these spheres spun on its own, the curator of the Klerksdorp Museum cleared that up too. He said that when he put one sphere on its glass shelf when a journalist came to visit, the sphere naturally rotated a bit because it's round. The area where the museum is located often experiences earth tremors from gold mining activities nearby. The oldest known human-like footprints could be 6 million years old. They were found on the Greek island of Crete in 2002. If the number is correct, it would mean that early human ancestors may have migrated between Europe and Africa much earlier than we previously thought. This doesn't mean Africa is not the cradle of humankind, though. It could just prove that early human ancestors moved back and forth between continents. Some researchers believe the footprints were left by a bipedal creature possibly related to an early human ancestor nicknamed El Greco. According to scientists who studied them, the footprints have a very human-like shape, with 5 toes and a parallel big toe. Some scientists are skeptical about it and suggest the prints might be from a late European ape. The new study analyzed fossilized marine microorganisms found in the sedimentary rocks to determine the footprint's age and prove it's actually 6 million years. The next amazing find that keeps scientists entertained is the Dorchester plot. It's a beautifully crafted metal vessel with some fancy geometric designs embossed in shiny silver. The pot was discovered in, who could have thought, Dorchester in 1852 under quite unusual circumstances. During a powerful blast, the pot broke into 2 pieces. Scientists believe it was originally embedded within a rock or boulder known as pudding stone. The rock from which the Dorchester pot emerged is dated to be around 500 million years old, so it could mean the pot itself is also that old. The current and less exciting theory suggests that the Dorchester pot is a Victorian-era candlestick holder. Such things were really trending back then, so it's not a surprise to find such fancy household item from that time. The Dorchester pot falls into the category of ooparts, or out-of-place artifacts. Those are objects that seem too advanced for the time period they're supposedly from. If we accept that the pot is 500 million years old, then whoever made it was way ahead of their times in terms of crafts and tech. One extra mystery is that the pot has an engraving of a plant that most likely disappeared from Earth over 100,000 years ago. Sounds like good proof the pot is really extra old. Now, it looks like the oldest map in Europe is a stone from 4,000 years ago. This Bronze Age slab was found in France in the year 1900 at an ancient burial ground. The carvings on the slab show in 3 dimensions the River Oddi network with a fantastic accuracy of around 80% over an 18-mile stretch. There are other stone-carved maps around the world, but this one is unique because it shows a specific area to scale. Looks like the slab's carvings don't just map rivers and hills, but also settlements, barrow sites, and field systems. Archaeologists say the slab wasn't used for navigation, but rather to symbolize power. The detailed markings on the slab might have served to illustrate the domain of a local ruler, possibly a prince or king, to show their control over the territory. When the ruler lost power, the slab was likely repurposed as part of a burial vault. The unique artifact was stored in the cellar of a museum. For decades, no one even noticed until several scholars read older reports about the slab and decided to check it out. They conducted a detailed analysis using 3D techniques. Their research proved that the creators of the slab had not only etched lines into the rock, but also modified its surface to reflect the topography of the landscape with high accuracy. The Salzburg cube, also known as the Wolf's Egg Iron, was discovered in the late 19th century in Austria. Now, don't let the name mislead you. It doesn't look like a cube at all. It's more like a rounded object with 2 flat sides. Down the middle, there's a groove, and the surface is covered with pits and craters. This unique appearance is the reason why many people think it might be something out of this world. Workers accidentally found this artifact when they blew apart a piece of coal. The coal seam it came from is thought to be over 60 million years old. The Salzburg cube moved between museums, mysteriously vanished in the early 20th century, and then showed up again. A professor from Bonn University suggested it might be from a meteor, but they found no evidence of elements that you'd normally see in meteorites, like cobalt or nickel. Then researchers thought it must be a human-made object, possibly a Victorian-era candlestick holder. No one knows the true story of the cube or its current location. Yep, it disappeared again. Have you heard about the Meister print? It's a fossilized sandal print discovered in 1968, and it has sparked a lot of intrigue. There's a trilobite inside the print, which supposedly went extinct around 500 million years before humans even existed. But many historians think this age is an exaggeration. When Meister found the fossil, it was authenticated. But the scientist who did it didn't confirm it was a human sandal print. He only agreed there was a trilobite there. When another scientist visited the site, he found a 6-inch impression he believed was from a child's moccasin. But the footwear seemed to be new. So, could it be evidence of time travel? Proof that humans existed millions of years earlier than we thought? Or a sign that someone else visited early Earth? Or is it just a rock formation that looks like a sandal print? We still don't have the answers. Back in June 1936, a couple was walking along Red Creek in London, Texas. London, Texas? Yeah, when they stumbled upon something unusual. It was a piece of wood sticking out of what seemed to be an ancient rock formation. About 10 years later, their curious son decided to crack open the rock to see what was inside. And he saw a hammer, which looked surprisingly modern. Then, one unique finds enthusiast decided that the rock encasing the hammer was from the Cretaceous period. This would mean that someone dropped a 19th century hammer while dinosaurs like Triceratops were still roaming the earth. So, if this hammer was truly from the Cretaceous period, then the whole evolutionary theory would be wrong. And if the hammer was modern, it would mean the Cretaceous rock formation it came from was much younger than we thought. But the real answer was much simpler. The hammer was indeed modern, and geological processes had encased it in rock. Minerals can harden around an object in a relatively short time. So, the hammer was probably dropped by a miner a century or so ago, and the rock formed around it afterwards. And no, it wasn't a Victorian-era candlestick holder either. Do you remember 2011? Well, play along with me. A diver is set to go deep into the waters of the Musi River, located in the heart of an Indonesian island. He is one among many who have been getting unbelievable artifacts from the bottom of the river. Little by little, divers and fishers discover a long-lost Sumatran civilization. Known as the Island of Gold, the kingdom of Srivijaya was most likely the closest to a real-life El Dorado there has ever been. However, it disappeared late in the 13th century, and until recently, researchers didn't even know the exact location of the kingdom. Picture a civilization built on a river, a true water world. According to the archaeologists that have been studying Srivijaya, houses, markets, and places of worship were built on wooden piles above the level of the water. Citizens moved around like modern-day Venetians in simple boats. Srivijaya was known to be a rich and important kingdom. It existed from the 7th to the 11th century CE. It was part of the Silk Road, and anyone traveling from east to west had to pass through the city. Their kings were smart and gained control of the Malacca Strait, which allowed the town to have total control over trading routes in the region. If anything, they sure were honoring the town's name. Srivijaya translates from Sanskrit into prosperous victor, or simply glorious. The kingdom was an important commercial outpost of ancient times. It was strategically located among the most influential commercial routes of the ancient world, which means its citizens became extremely rich. Ancient wealthy societies used to overly display their gold and precious metals. They would often use these metals as offerings to their deities, or they would use them to forge large statues and to make jewelry for kings and queens and decorations for their palaces. Srivijaya wasn't different. Local Indonesian divers who have been exploring the half-mile of the Musi River near the city of Palembang have found some evidence. So far, they've discovered a life-size statue of Buddha, jewelry studded with precious gems, temple bells, mirrors, golden jugs, and other items. No official archaeological excavations have been done in the area, so these artifacts are the first items of the Srivijaya Empire ever found. Sean Kinsley, a British maritime archaeologist who has reported on these discoveries, says he is truly surprised. For long, people have been speculating about the true wealth of Srivijaya, and it seems that the rumors have been confirmed. We're starting from ground zero, he says. We don't know what clothes the people of Srivijaya wore, what their tastes were, what kinds of ceramics they like to eat off. Even though this discovery has brought excitement to the scientific community, there is a downside. Divers and fishers sell the retrieved artifacts at the International Antiquities Market before archaeologists can take a look at them. Researchers could try to buy some items, but they're sold for millions of dollars worldwide. Most of the information we know about this El Dorado of the East was learned from merchant accounts of the city. These descriptions say Srivijaya was a kingdom of human-eating snakes and multilingual parrots. That's weird. Some say its active volcanoes gave the town an eerie and enigmatic sight, and all stories emphasize the amount of gold available there. Travel reports were a common way to describe cities in ancient times. In case you didn't know, this is how the legend of El Dorado originally began. As European explorers began their excavations in South American lands back in the 1500s, the word got out that an Amazonian civilization used to paint their leader in gold as an offering to higher powers. The legend of El Hombre Dorado, also known as the Golden Man, began to quickly spread around Europe. It turned out that it was only a ceremonial piece of pre-Columbian civilization. It had nothing to do with the land of infinite gold. Now, no one knows what brought about the decline of the Srivijaya Empire. Some speculate that its active volcanoes could have swallowed it, or maybe wooden houses built above the river eventually sank. Maybe if divers keep retrieving lost items from the bottom of the river, archaeologists will be able to figure out what happened to the city. It seems to be quite common in the history of the world. Some ancient civilizations disappeared without a trace, as happened with the Mayan civilization, for example. The Mayans managed to build one of the biggest empires in pre-Columbian America. It was believed to be home to over 2 million people, and it thrived for over 6 centuries. Its sudden demise is something that bothers archaeologists and scientists alike. The Mayans began to settle in South America as early as 1500 BCE. Their civilization spanned Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize. They are believed to have built around 40 cities at the height of their empire. They also developed a complex hieroglyph system that has been studied since it was discovered by modern scientists. The Mayans were keen engineers, astronomers, and farmers. They were post-nomadic people that settled in vast areas of farmland where they could grow corn and other types of vegetables. Archaeologists are still learning a lot about the Mayan civilization by examining their ruins. The city of Chichen Itza, located in the Yucatan Peninsula, is one of the most important Mayan sites unearthed today. The site is made up of a total of 26 ruins, and it is home to a world-famous pyramid known as El Castillo. It consists of a series of square terraces with stairways on each of the 4 sides of the temple. It was built as an homage to a feathered serpent deity. The Mayans were such architectural geniuses that they managed to build a pyramid that cast a particular shadow. More specifically, in the late afternoon during the spring and fall equinoxes, the pyramid casts several triangular shadows that create the illusion of a feathered serpent crawling down the pyramid. And they created this with none of the tech we have today. The city is so amazing that since 2007, it has been considered one of the 7 wonders of the New World. The Mayan Empire thrived for over 6 centuries due to their wise resource management system and astronomical knowledge. They were able to accurately predict eclipses and, using their rudimentary technology, could even locate Venus and Mars. They had everything to thrive for much longer than they actually did. This is why the Mayans' fall intrigues modern scientists so much. No one has been able to understand completely what led to their demise. That is, until a recent discovery. A study done by NASA claims it can explain what might have happened. Scientists have uncovered a sample of pollen trapped for over 1,200 years in ancient layers of lake sediment, which dates back to the time just before the collapse of the civilization. The analysis has revealed something completely new about the Mayans. Instead of the suspected claims that the Mayans disappeared due to terrible disease or some extended conflict in the region, it could have happened due to deforestation. Perhaps to build their entire empire, they had to cut a lot of trees. Without trees, their soil could have eroded, and all their fertile lands could have slowly and gradually become barren. According to NASA scientists, the temperatures in the region could have risen by about 6 degrees, and from that point on, the land would have become even drier and crops more difficult to grow. Basically, NASA says that the Mayans couldn't do the sole thing that made them thrive, which was agriculture, and their kingdom began to decline. Oh yeah, and this theory was supported by yet another find. Archaeologists found skeletons from the time of the empire. Those had prominent signs of malnutrition. This theory might really shed new light on Mayan history. It could explain what brought down such a powerful civilization. So, what do you say? Which theory is true? Have we actually managed to find out the reason for the fall of the Mayan Empire?
The most exciting accidental discovery I've made in my life was a $10 bill in my old winter jacket. Some folks are luckier though, as they find underground cities from centuries ago or make inventions that turn them into millionaires. Velcro was invented after a routine walk in the woods. Kellogg's cornflakes were inspired by a chipped tooth, and Play-Doh saved a business empire from falling by chance. Back in 1998, electrical engineer John Williams found something that looked like an electrical plug sticking out of the ground. He started digging and noticed that it was stuck in a small rock. He found it in a rural location in North America, far from civilization, industrial complexes, airports, factories, and electronic plants. This piece of electronics embedded into a solid granite stone got the nickname Enigmalith and a price tag of $500,000. Some scientists are sure it's a big hoax and not a souvenir left by some visitors from space, as Williams claims. But the finder of the rock wanted to prove that it was a real piece of ancient technology, some sort of an electrical connector. If it's not a hoax, then this little find could be proof that humans, or some other civilization from the past, were way more advanced than we ever thought. They must have managed to invent a way to transmit electricity long before humans in the 19th century. He offered scientists to take a look at this find and establish what it really is without breaking the rock open, but there were no takers. Williams consulted an engineer and a geologist, and both confirmed there were no traces of glue on the electronic component. It hasn't been welded either, so it must be as old as the rock, which is around 100,000 years old, according to geological analysis. Dr. John Kellogg had a philosophy of biological living with regular exercise, massage, plenty of water, zero bad habits, caffeine, and no meat. At the end of the 19th century, he looked over a health institute in Michigan. He once whipped up a mix of flour, oats, and cornmeal. He thought that by baking whole grains at high temps, they'd be easier on the stomach and healthier overall. He baked the mix twice and first made cookies, but a patient chipped a tooth on that version. Then he decided to break it into small pieces. It's hard to pinpoint exactly how Kellogg cornflakes came to be, with so many versions of the story floating around. Kellogg's wife, Ella, and his brother Will both claim they played a role in creating the flakes, along with several other family members and sanitarium staff. The company lore says that it all went down one night in 1898, when some wheat-based cereal dough was left out too long, fermenting in the process. When rolled out thin, the slightly moldy dough turned into these perfect large thin flakes that got all crispy and yummy in the oven. Over the next few years, Will Kellogg kept tweaking the recipe and realized that corn, not wheat, made even crunchier, tastier flakes. His brand, Kellogg's Corn Flakes, has grown into a multi-billion-dollar company. Swiss engineer George de Mestral once went for a walk with his dog and came back with a concept that would later go to space. Once they got back from the woods, de Mestral noticed that his pants and his dog's fur were covered in the tiny barbs of the cocklebur plant. He examined the burrs under the microscope and noticed that they were shaped like tiny hooks that stuck to loops on clothes and fur. He decided to recreate that natural tech to design an extra strong fastener, one with many practical uses. He was testing different materials for his invention for so many years and finally settled on nylon. He also needed to design a special type of loom that could weave the fibers in the right size, shape, and density. It took de Mestral a total of 14 years until he introduced the world to Velcro, which means velvet and hook in French. De Mestral was hoping his invention would replace the zipper on clothes, but the fashion world found Velcro cheap-looking and unattractive. But NASA didn't think so, and used Velcro for astronaut spacesuits and helmets in the 1960s. Now, Velcro is used everywhere, from footwear to toys to airline seat cushions. Before the middle of the 20th century, most homes were heated with coal. It left soot throughout the house, which was especially visible on wallpapers. Kutal Products was the largest company that sold wallpaper cleaner, but in the 50s, more and more people switched to gas, oil, and electricity, and the sooty buildup problem was mostly solved. The owner of Kutal Products was trying to save his business. Meanwhile, his sister-in-law read that wallpaper cleaner could be used to make holiday decorations. She worked as a nursery school teacher, and modeling clay was pretty hard for her students to handle, so she decided to test this material for molding into different shapes, and it works out just fine. She told her relatives about the discovery and suggested a name for it: Play-Doh. The Kutal company was about to go bankrupt, so it was a great alternative for a new business. Soon enough, Macy's and Marshall Field got interested in the new toy and started selling it. Play-Doh was originally only in one color, white, but soon expanded to red, blue, and yellow. They also made several changes to the original recipe, but the mixture is still mostly the same as when it was used to clean wallpapers. An urban legend says that if you take all the Play-Doh compound ever made and put it through their Fun Factory playset, you'll get a snake that will wrap around the planet 300 times. A man in Turkey was renovating his home when he knocked down a wall in his basement with a sledgehammer. He found a tunnel behind the wall that led to an ancient underground city. The tunnel led to more tunnels and then halls and chambers. It turned out to be a whole underground complex with 18 stories and without a single inhabitant, abandoned a long time ago. It was the city of Derinkuyu, built thousands of years ago, a home for up to 20,000 people. Whoever built it had great skill, and it's rather easy to build tunnels out of the soft rock, but cave-ins are a big risk. None of the floors at Derinkuyu have ever collapsed. The city had a complex ventilation system with over 15,000 shafts. The upper levels had the best ventilation and were used for living and sleeping quarters. The lower levels were mainly used for storage, but they also had a dungeon. In between, there were room for domestic animals, a school, a convent, and small churches. John Martin, a forestry professor, was out exploring a forest in Wisconsin one night. He was shining a UV flashlight up into the canopy to spot lichens, fungi, plants, and frogs that glow under the UV light. Then suddenly, he heard a flying squirrel chirping at a bird feeder, pointed the flashlight at it, and saw it light up pink. The professor told his colleagues about it, and they decided to investigate further. They checked out some flying squirrel skins at museums to see if this pink glow is a common thing among them. It turns out that almost all of the flying squirrel specimens they looked at had the same pink fluorescence. Non-flying squirrels didn't glow at all. Other animals with fluorescence, like puffins and chameleons, glow blue under UV light. The only other mammals with fluorescent fur are around 20 species of opossum. They live in different ecosystems and have different diets. The only thing they have in common with flying squirrels is that they're all active at night. And regular squirrels prefer sunlight. There's enough ultraviolet light in low-light conditions, and nocturnal animals need UV vision. So the pink glow might have to do with nighttime perception and navigation, especially in cold and snowy conditions. Or it could be a way for male flying squirrels to attract prospective mates. It could be a sort of mimicry.
Welcome to Rapa Nui, better known as Easter Island. It's a tiny speck in the vast Pacific Ocean, 2,200 miles away from the coast of Chile. This island is most famous for its eerie moai statues. This place is also home to one of the most mysterious writing systems in the world, called Ronga Ronga. We found it on 27 small wooden tablets. For years, historians have been arguing about the true history of these tablets, and now we might have found the truth. Humans first set foot on this island in the 12th century. For many years, it was home to the Rapa Nui people. They were pretty isolated out there in the Pacific Ocean until Europeans arrived in the 1720s. Europeans brought with them lots of troubles, leaving only a small fraction of the native population alive. Later in the 19th century, a missionary, Eugene Iro, went to the island and discovered the wooden tablets with intricate symbols carved on them. He wrote how marvelous they are, but there are hundreds of them on the island, and that they can be found in every household. But unfortunately, not all of them survive to this day. We've only got 27 of them. Some of them were heavily weathered, burned, or otherwise damaged, and now they're scattered all over the world in museums and private collections. Some of the language's artifacts were carted off to Tahiti and then to Europe by Europeans, leaving none behind on Easter Island itself. The 4 sacred tablets found their home in a congregation in Rome. They were the ones used in the recent discovery. For years, historians have been arguing whether this writing system was made up by the islanders themselves or they borrowed it from Europeans. To find the truth, they decided to use a technique called radiocarbon dating. All organic materials, like wood, charcoal, and so on, contain a tiny amount of a radioactive form of carbon called carbon-14. When life comes to an end, things stop taking in carbon-14, and the amount they had starts to decay over time. By measuring how much carbon-14 is left in a sample, we can assume how old this sample is. This is how we learn the age of many fossils and artifacts. So, they looked at the age of some Ronga Ronga tablets. 3 of them were crafted from trees grown in the 18th or 19th century, which aligns with the arrival of Europeans. However, one of them is older than the Europeans' first visit to the island. There are 2 reasons to believe that Rapa Nui people created this writing system themselves. First, Ronga Ronga works differently from European languages. Decoding it is a pretty hard task. Unlike English, this language boasts over 400 unique glyphs, none of which resemble any known writing system. There were many attempts to decipher this language, and none of them were successful so far. And second, one of the tablets is shown to be from around the 15th century, before the Europeans arrived. The problem is that radiocarbon dating can only tell us when the wood the tablet was made from was cut down, not when the writing was put on it. And since we've only got one tablet to go by, this isn't enough to be completely sure. On the other hand, why and where would they preserve cut wood for over 200 years just to grab it and write something on it one day? But anthropologists and historians say that it's possible. Scarce wood resources might have led the islanders to reuse old driftwood, which could be centuries older than the writing itself. This is known as the old wood problem in archaeology. Plus, the tablet looks very preserved. It was maintained to protect it from wood-damaging insects, humidity, and so on. That's why it survived over the centuries. Whatever is written on it, it was probably important for the Rapa Nui people. Now, all of these are guesses and clues, but scientists are cautiously optimistic. They believe that ronga-ronga could be one of the rare instances of independent writing invention, like those of the Sumerians or the Egyptians. But we need more evidence. In the Rapa Nui language, rogo-rogo means to recite or to declaim. Not everyone could write, only a select few. Probably only the elite of Easter Island, mostly men, knew and could read this written language. After colonization, none of them survived. So now we have to rack our brains trying to figure out what's written here. First, scholars can't agree on what type of script it is. We aren't even sure that this was their language. But even if it was, we don't know whether it's a primitive form of writing or a fully developed system. In the 1990s, a linguist, Stephen Roger Fisher, believed he might have cracked the code of ronga-ronga structure. His idea was that these tablets conveyed cosmogonies. Cosmogonies are stories or narratives that explain how the universe was created and how natural phenomena came to be. They often come from ancient traditions and cultures, like those found in East Polynesia. The tablets could have talked about things like how the world began, where everything came from, and how different aspects of nature, like the stars or the mountains, were formed. This would also explain why only the wise elite could write. Fisher thought that ronga-ronga is a mix of logographic and semasiographic systems, which means that some symbols represent spoken words, while others represent ideas or concepts. But deciphering them would be very hard because it requires extensive memory and knowing context, because the symbols are more like hints than complete expressions. However, other language experts disagreed with his ideas, saying there were problems with how he put together his theory. Unfortunately, Fisher couldn't prove this hypothesis. Maybe these are just drawings. If we look at the tablets, there are some things that look recognizable: people, animals, plants, and geometric shapes. There are some birds. One of them looks like a frigate bird, which Rapa Nui people associate with the deity Maki Maki. There are also fish, centipedes, and so on, or at least these glyphs look like them. Could it be just art or a form of decoration? Maybe, but there are some problems. The glyphs show a high degree of complexity and structure. They also keep the same style. For example, there are several symbols that show something human-like with a raised hand. The only difference is different heads. As if it wasn't complicated enough, this unique writing style also uses a system known as reverse boustrophodon. This means that each alternate line is flipped upside down, resembling nothing seen elsewhere. We don't know why they would turn the tablet upside down after each line. But all this shows that they had some sort of system and organization behind these symbols. Plus, it seems like they use these tablets every day for some practical purpose. But there's some hope for the future. New technology, like AI and other computer programs, might help us understand lost languages. We already started creating algorithms that could help us solve other mysteries, like the Voynich manuscript. Academics even organized the Vesuvius Challenge, a machine learning competition that, in 2023, cracked the riddle of the ancient Herculaneum scrolls. The scrolls were buried under volcanic mud after the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. In real life, the scrolls are very fragile, so deciphering them would be a very hard task. But with digital scanning and machine learning, it's much easier. They have a rich history. They most likely belong to the personal library of an Epicurean philosopher named Philodemus. These scrolls contain very important insights into Greek philosophy and Latin literature. If we decipher more of them, we'll learn more about the rich history of the Roman Empire. A piece of whale rib has recently been found in a North Carolina mine. Not a big deal, some might think. Hey, why can't a whale be a miner, right? But this fragment offers scientists a unique glimpse at the interactions between prehistoric sharks and whales from around 3 to 4 million years ago. The thing is, 3 tooth marks embellish the rib. That means that the whale was once badly bitten by an animal with a super powerful jaw. Judging by the spacing between the tooth marks, and it reaches almost 2.5 inches. This animal could be a mega-toothed shark. I'm talking about the megalodon. Or it could be a different shark species which was around at that time. The curvature of the shark's jaw shows that the animal was relatively small, between 13 and 20 feet long. Yeah, small. As for the whale, it seems to be the ancestor of a great blue or humpback whale. Researchers are amazed. You don't usually expect to find evidence of animal interaction and behavior preserved in the fossil record. After examining the sample carefully, they concluded that the shark must have gone away with a mouthful, but the whale had survived because most of the fossil fragment is covered with what is known as woven bone. It quickly forms in response to localized infection. Such bone isn't particularly strong, and later the body remodels it into compact bone tissue. But it takes time. The presence of this bone means that the healing was incomplete and the whale passed away 2 to 6 weeks after the unfortunate encounter. On the other hand, its demise could have been unrelated to the infection and injury. Only a handful of fossils show such kinds of interactions between ancient animals. You can often find bite marks on fossils indicating where the animal passed away and its carcass was scavenged. But this fossil is one of a few examples that not only show a wound inflicted by another animal, but also demonstrate that the prey survived. All fossils are exciting for paleontologists. Yes, they need to get out more. But some might look terrifying to regular people. For example, look at this picture of tentacle arms and octagonal-shaped heads. When it first appeared in mass media, internet users claimed that it was some ancient organism that had come from space. Others thought the story was fake, but in fact, both the picture and the fossil are real. The fossil is known as a mortality plate, a fossilized representation of a mass extinction event of one or several species. The fossil actually contains more than a dozen specimens of a type of marine organism called a crinoid. Despite their looks, crinoids were not plants but marine animals. This particular species lived deep underwater on the seafloor. Crinoids were related to starfish, sea urchins, and brittle stars. These creatures could attach themselves to the seafloor with stalks made up of flexible porous discs connected by soft tissue. The stalks were hollow, and that's where the animal's nervous system was located. Crinoids absorbed oxygen through thin-walled tube feet. The creatures usually reached the length of more than 8 inches and had 5 arms lined with leathery-looking tentacle-like structures. They fed on plankton and sloughed off organic material. Now, even though these fossil finds seem to be super exciting, few creatures in the fossil record confuse scientists as much as the Tully monster. This curious sea creature sported a toothy, trunk-like snout and eyes splayed out on a rigid rod. But the most bizarre thing? It has been impossible to classify. Researchers have been considering a variety of organisms, for example, segmented worms, swimming slugs, and primitive eel-like creatures, since the monster was discovered in 1966. Recently, they have even tried to connect it to some species of jawless fish with a backbone-like structure. A team of scientists from Japan has used high-resolution laser scanners to examine the anatomy of Tully monster fossils in 3D. They concluded that the enigmatic fossil might be an invertebrate after all, and still, the true identity of the creature remains elusive. In the 1950s, amateur fossil hunter Francis Tully found a ghostly imprint of a torpedo-shaped organism with a huge tail fin in the Mizon Creek fossil beds in Illinois. Tully had never seen anything similar to the torpedo structure. He took his find to Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History. Paleontologists working there were baffled as well. Since then, scientists haven't been able to determine where the creature fits on the phylogenetic family tree, or where they should spend Thanksgiving. In 1741, An explorer and captain named Vitus Johansen Bering led an expedition to map the coast of Alaska. The ship he was on got shipwrecked on what later became known as Bering Island, and they got hungry. Half the crew survived thanks to the discovery of an extremely large sea cow. With the meat of these animals nourishing them, the sailors managed to build a small ship from the wreckage and return home. On their way back, a scientist who was among them spent his time documenting the animals and plants they had found. The sea cow was particularly interesting because without it, the crew wouldn't have survived. These animals were more than 26 feet long and weighed around 10 tons. All sea cows are members of the order Sirenia, marine mammals more closely related to elephants than cows. The scientists described them as having black skin, a small head, and stubby forelimbs. Those sea cows floated on the water's surface, munching on kelp. After the information about these animals became widespread, sea otter fur trading expeditions made use of that convenient depot en route. Sea cows were docile and could be easily hunted. Long story short, within 27 years after the scientists mentioned those animals, they were driven to extinction. But it's not the saddest part. The fossil record reveals a much deeper and darker history. Fossils of sea cows have been discovered all over the world, from Japan to Mexico. It means that the animal once thrived in the vast kelp beds around the entire North Pacific Rim. That small population discovered by the expedition was probably the last remains of a once much larger and way healthier population. More likely, Aboriginal hunting had already reduced the numbers of these animals to near extinction levels, and the final blow came from Western hunters. The living close relatives of those ancient sea cows are rarely hunted today. Still, they're under threat of extinction themselves. To some, this amazing fossil might look a bit disturbing. Slaves' lentils are fossils that belong to animals called nummelites. They lived and thrived in a warm, shallow sea covering part of Egypt around 40 million years ago. The name nummelites hints at the fact that larger specimens resemble coins, and in Egyptian folklore, they're even referred to as angels' money. These creatures have a simple, single-celled structure, which contrasts with their super intricate skeleton. Look at this series of spiral overlapping whorls. Each whorl is divided into countless tiny chambers. Nummelites can grow to be 4 inches in diameter, and still, they are the fossils of single-celled animals related to amoeba. How and why did they grow to be so large? The reason could be their symbiotic relationships with other smaller organisms. In the case of modern species, such symbionts are tiny golden-brown single-celled algae called diatoms. The shells of nummelites are relatively transparent, and since they're flat, there's a large surface area for the light needed for the diatoms to photosynthesize. For some reasons, scientists are still debating about them. The presence of plant symbionts in animals dwelling in the sea encourages the growth of a calcareous skeleton in hosts. So, the gigantic size of the nummelites in Egypt could be due to their close relationship with symbiotic diatoms. Does that make sense? Fun fact: a species of nummelites evolve very fast, and their fossils change from one layer of sediments to the next. So, the limestone used for the pyramids of Giza are so packed with such fossils that it's known as nummulitic limestone. This limestone also contains 2 kinds of nummelites, the smaller slaves' lentils and the larger angel's money. But those are not different species, but rather different stages in the life cycle of a single species.
It all happened in 1708. On June 8th, the Spanish galleon San Jose was going back home to Spain from the Caribbean. In total, there were 17 ships. The captain of the San Jose knew they were in for some trouble, as English ships were lurking in that area. He knew they would be after the treasure loaded on the ships. The price of the treasure from the New World was so astronomical that it could turn the course of historic events in Europe upside down. In order to be safe, the Spanish galleon was to reach Cartagena de Indias. It's where we have Colombia now. But sadly, other things were predestined for the San Jose. The 4 English ships appeared. The galleon couldn't just escape them. There was no choice but to turn around and fight. Then all the chaos started. Red flags showing that the battle started. Firing cannons, the smell of gunpowder. Nobody knows exactly how it all ended. As dusk fell, it was hard to see clearly what was happening. The only thing that remained in history was the sinking flagship San Jose. Then, silence. No wonder that San Jose, being the flagship, was the most strategically important galleon. She would carry an insane amount of precious metals, such as gold and silver, pearls, and gems such as emeralds. All of that went to stay on the bottom of the ocean for the next 3 centuries. But how come this lost treasure got so legendary? First off, the financial estimates made by scientists shocked people. The ship reportedly carried 7 million to 12 million pesos. Let's translate that to today's money. Yeah, it may not be the wealth that Elon Musk has, but it's around $10 billion. With that money, you could treat yourself to a couple of private jets, a whole car park of Lamborghinis, and a posh mansion. And you'd still have a lot of money left. You may think it all must have gotten rusty, just like the bits and pieces found in the Titanic. But when it comes to gold, things work differently. The Titanic didn't carry gold, or at least not that much of it. The jewels that were on the Titanic were personal belongings. And the cool thing about gold is that it never reacts with oxygen. It means that real gold won't rust or tarnish. So if your golden necklace got somewhat darker, it's a telltale sign it's not pure gold. It's an alloy, which is also cool, by the way, as you can easily clean it. Going back to San Jose's lost treasure, the golden coins there, even over 300 years later, were supposed to look the same way as the day they were minted. Now, going back to the place where the ship supposedly sank, remember I told you the captain wanted to go to the shore where Colombia is today? Well, on December 4th, 2015, the ship was indeed found in the waters of Colombia. As with many other important things today, the world learned about it from a tweet. It was sent by the Colombian then-president Juan Manuel Santos. People have been looking for the San Jose for decades, and once it was finally found, it only got more popular, and even more myths about it began to appear. One of the legends was told by Señor Santos himself. After the wreck had been found, there was a short radio interview. Thing is, the discovery was pretty unexpected. Many people spent a lot of time and effort looking for that wreck, and many of them even gave up hope of ever finding it. Juan Manuel Santos told a story about how the wreck had been discovered. There was an official event outside Colombia where he was accosted by a man. He looked like the famous writer Hemingway. He sported a white beard and had white hair. The only thing that Hemingway-looking man wanted was 2 minutes of Santos's time. The president conceded and listened to the man. What happened next was unbelievable. The man pulled out an antique map, more precisely, a carefully framed copy, and told the president that no one else knew about it. The man pointed to one exact spot. He said that it was the exact location of the treasure, and that that place didn't appear on any other map. He guaranteed that he knew where the treasure was. The story sounded crazy and swashbuckling. Whoever that man was, he turned out to be right. His identity remains a mystery for everyone, but somehow that man found the funding, determined the area to be inspected, and even made his way to meet the president. Right, the San Jose was stuffed with gold, and whoever found it would get filthy rich for the rest of their life. But let's face it, there's no way an ordinary person could ever discover such a treasure, as it requires too much effort and too much funding. But what if you're into treasure hunting and you want to go and find some treasure chests somewhere? Well, I guess I have a story about ordinary people looking and even eventually finding real treasure. Meet Forrest Fenn, an eccentric millionaire who hid a $1 to $5 million treasure. The exact worth was unidentified. You see, even Mr. Fenn himself said he never tried to appraise it. Inside the chest, there were 265 American gold eagles and double eagles, ancient coins, gold nuggets, you name it. Forrest stashed the chest in the Rocky Mountains and announced the treasure hunt back in 2010. Now let's focus on a map for a little bit and see how vast the Rocky Mountains are. Basically, the treasure hunters were supposed to sweep the two countries, both the USA and Canada. At first, it was a small treasure hunt with only a couple of people who knew about it. But sometime later, there was pretty much a competition, as tens of thousands of people set off to look for the treasure. There was research stating that over the decade, about 350,000 people tried their luck looking for the mystery chest. To announce the hunt, Forrest Fenn used a poem made up of 24 lines. The poem had some hints in it that most treasure hunters failed to decode. It was so well hidden that it took 10 years to finally discover it. There was also a blog called Thrill of the Chase, and on June 6, 2020, Mr. Fenn finally posted the long-awaited news. The treasure had been found. Forrest himself admitted that anyone who read the instructions from the poem carefully could find the treasure. The poem created a lot of buzz on the internet, with many users trying to decode the 9 hints the poem had. Some of them even suggested the possible keys to decode the puzzle. Those speculations might have helped the person who eventually found the treasure. At first, even Forrest Fenn himself didn't know who cracked all the codes in the poem, made it through the dense forest, and retrieved the chest. The lucky finder preferred to stay anonymous, and all we initially knew was that it was a man from the eastern United States. The winner sent a photograph to Forrest Fenn, and thus the treasure hunt was officially over. Sometime later, though, he revealed himself. It was Jack Stewart, a former journalist and medical student. The treasure was hidden under a canopy of stars in a forest in the Rocky Mountains. The vegetation there is lush, so the chest was hidden deep within. The chest had never been moved from the place where it was originally hidden. The exact location is still unknown, but we know that the treasure was hidden in Wyoming. Jack admitted that not all the advertised treasures were found in the chest. A small gold frog on a necklace and a Spanish emerald ring were missing. Forrest indeed found the frog in his collection and gave it to Stewart, but he failed to find the ring. The treasure hunt created by Forrest Fenn may seem extravagant, but he explained why he decided to start it. The only thing he claimed to have in mind was to give people some hope.
50 ships and 20 airplanes have gone missing. Many people have disappeared, and mysterious forces might have... Oh wait, the wrong script. This Bermuda Triangle is located in Transylvania. My bad. So, once upon a time in the heart of Transylvania, there was a mysterious place that people named the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania. Look at these twisted trees and their tangled undergrowth. It seems like some evil creature may appear from behind a tree at any moment. There might even be ghosts and mysterious creatures that came from space, as stories said. The forest became so popular in the 1960s when a man was chilling there on a warm August afternoon with his girlfriend and a couple of friends. Suddenly, his girlfriend pointed at something unusual in the sky. A man came closer to the spot where she was standing and, to his surprise, saw it too. It was a weird silver disc shining in the sky. He quickly pulled out his camera and took 4 photos before the creepy object bolted away. The object was there for a mere 2 minutes, but the man developed his film and the picture ended up being published in local papers. Many people were skeptical about this. They claimed that those were most likely some weather balloons that looked like a spaceship because they were photographed in odd lighting. But no weather balloons, blimps, or any other objects were in the sky above the forest on that day. Spooky, huh? That's not the only campfire legend from that area. Stories say that those who ventured too deep into the murky depths of this creepy place often did not return, which is how it got its nickname in the first place. There was a shepherd who entered the forest together with his 200 sheep. They were never found again. People have also been whispering stories about a 5-year-old girl who disappeared one day. She re-emerged one day, 5 years later, wearing the same clothes as the day she went missing. Plus, she hadn't aged a day. There are people who entered the forest and did manage to return, but with severe burns, high fever, and some other health issues they didn't have before. Some were sure that happened because the subsoil had lots of natural uranium with a high level of radioactivity. And according to others, it's not unusual that you come to this forest and feel like someone's watching you or your electronic devices just switch off. And now, here's something that's not a legend. The forest has a rich history. Some sources say it was home to the oldest settlement in Romania, dating all the way back to 6,500 BCE. Trees themselves are pretty mysterious. They grow in creepy spirals or have some unexpected zigzag patterns. Even though some scientists have come there to explore this phenomenon, they couldn't find the answer to why they're like this. It seems as if trees are twisting their limbs so they can reach out and grab you when you're not looking. And that's what's interesting. Each of these twisted trees spirals in a clockwise direction. But legends say lots of inexplicable things have happened in a specific part of the forest where you can't find trees or any other types of vegetation. It's a perfect circle called the clearing. The perfect name for a horror movie inspired by all these stories. The soil in this area with no vegetation has been tested, and no one has found any weird stuff or anomalies that could potentially stop plants from growing there. Some locals believe the forest has positive energy, which is why it's good to make a wish there. But many more people let their imagination run wild, telling stories about paranormal activities happening there, like mysterious spheres popping out in the middle of the forest or extraterrestrial lights. Either way, you and your castle can step aside, Dracula, because you're not the only scary story from Transylvania. Here's another reason you won't be able to sleep well tonight. The Isla de las Muñecas, or the Island of the Dolls. In the middle of the eerie and murky waters of canals near Mexico City, there's a small island. It may look charming at first, until you realize it's home to hundreds of dolls hanging from the trees and scattered throughout the overgrown vegetation. These dolls are old and decaying. They've lost their color over time, and their once cheerful faces are now twisted into expressions of despair and horror. There is a sad story behind this disturbing place. It says the island used to be home to a reclusive man who left his family more than 50 years ago to live alone on the island. He started obsessively collecting dolls that were lost in the canal. The story says he even traded products he grew to locals to get more dolls. The man didn't clean these dolls nor show any interest in fixing them. He would just decorate his island with them regardless of the state in which he found them. Even those that looked good ended up ruined due to winds and rain. They weren't just outside. His cabin was full of these scary dolls too. Many people were terrified of this place, claiming it was cursed. But others believed the dolls safeguarded the island. Moving to the suburbs of North London, where you can find the mysterious Highgate Cemetery. It's definitely not a typical resting place for the dearly departed. This cemetery has so many peculiar graves, including those of Karl Marx and Douglas Adams. But that's not what draws visitors to its gates. People come there because of the legends claiming that this place is haunted by all sorts of spooky creatures, including vampires. Yup, stories about shadowy figures hovering over graves with glowing red eyes and sharp fangs never get boring. But this place wasn't always this creepy. It was established in the middle of the 19th century, once neglected and overgrown with crumbling monuments and vegetation that seemed to swallow up graves. But these legends became popular along with the place itself in the 1970s, after the cemetery had appeared in several horror movies. Some visitors there are even self-proclaimed vampire hunters. There's this peaceful and charming village called Pluckley, just a short drive away from London. At least that's what it seems at first sight. People whisper Pluckley could be the most haunted village in England. As you go through its winding streets, you'll come across many spots legends say are haunted. Many of them are connected to the Daring family, which held the title of Lords of the Manor for over 4 centuries. What gives the sense of old times is the round-topped windows on many buildings. Legend has it, hundreds of years ago, Lord Daring escaped when his enemies captured him. He jumped through one of these windows head first. In commemoration of this pretty daring act, every window in the manor house and the village was made in the same style. Even though the manor house burned down in 1951, the legacy of Lord Daring's escape lives on in the charming village of Pluckley. Some say Pluckley is surrounded by the so-called Screaming Wood. There are many legends about paranormal events that have occurred there. There are nice walking trails in this wood, but to be honest, I'd only be brave enough to hit them during the day. And how about the Crooked Forest? It's in Poland, and it consists of 400 pine trees whose trunks take a sharp 90-degree turn and then become weirdly curved, like the letter J. Someone planted them in the early 1930s, but it's still not completely clear how all these trees got the same curve. One scientist said this looked like a typical response to gravity. Plants have a special mechanism that allows them to reorient themselves when the stem is horizontal to gravity. So, these trees may have been grown this way for making boats or furniture. Of course, human imagination goes way beyond science, so many tried to explain the existence of these trees with stories of spirits that possess these trees or mysterious creatures from space that made them this way. Okay, I'm on. Let me just grab my popcorn.
So, if you still haven't made your fortune, don't be too sad. There are huge amounts of money out there longing to be discovered. Look at this humble Chinese villager. At 51 years old, he accidentally made 4 million won, which is over $600,000, without doing anything special. The thing is, he and his son just found it in a pig while doing their basic chores they would do every single day. The stone they found inside the pig is called bezor, and I bet you've never heard of it before. It's not common in the West, but it's a big deal in traditional Chinese medicine. If you look at this stone, you may think it's ew. This 4-inch long, 2.7-inch wide treasure is hairy and looks a bit gross at first glance, and it doesn't get better. After discovering the stone, the father and the son took it to Shanghai for an appraisal, and it cost them around $6,000. But still, the initial expenses don't seem so big, considering they're a mere 1% of what that stone is worth. Now, not everything in an animal's belly is going to make you rich. Only the gallbladder stuff is real gold. I know that women can buy themselves flowers and write their names in the sand, but let's face it, women just love it when we offer them fancy bouquets. Still, today, it's much easier to do than it was in the 17th century. Back then, an average Joe would have to slave his way to afford just one flower. Somewhere around the 1630s, there was a tulip mania, where tulip bulbs cost more than gold. Okay, the price wasn't real. It was a speculative bubble way before all the other economic drama we see today. We just haven't learned our lesson yet. Back at that time, a single tulip bulb was sold for more than what a skilled artisan made in an entire year. And it wasn't just any tulip bulb. We're talking about bulbs with fancy colors and patterns that were rare and sought after. The tulip market was like the stock market at the time, with traders making deals in taverns and signing contracts with each other. It was all about supply and demand. And just like with any bubble, prices eventually crashed in February 1637, leaving everyone with empty pockets, scratching their heads, and feeling ill. Meanwhile, speaking of feeling under the weather, back in 15th century Europe, people turned to Egyptian mummies for relief from headaches, stomach issues, and even more serious conditions modern medicine still can't beat today. Embalmed bodies were thought to have some magical healing powers. But why did folks eat mummies in the first place? Well, it all started with a mix-up in translations. There was a substance called mumia that was considered super valuable for its healing properties. But when Western Europeans got wind of it through letters from other nations, they mistakenly thought it came from Egyptian mummies. This led to a whole fashion of medical mummy eating. People believed that consuming parts of mummies could cure all sorts of ailments. So they started raiding Egyptian tombs and selling mummies like hotcakes. Demand was so high that some shady characters even started making fake mummies out of… Trust me, you don't want to know it. I'll leave it to your imagination. But you can write your ideas in the comments. Fast forward to the Victorian era, and the enthusiasm with mummies was at an all-time high. Egyptomania was in full swing, with mummy unwrapping parties becoming a popular pastime. It wasn't until the late 19th century that the use of mumia finally fizzled out. One day, A dead sperm whale washed up on a beach in La Palma, Spain, and a professor was sent on a mission to crack the case of the animal's demise. Amidst crashing waves and the massive carcass, he stumbled upon a surprising revelation: a hefty 21-pound stone stuck at its intestines. But this was no ordinary rock. Valued at 500,000 euros, which is over $545,000, it turned out to be ambergris, also known as floating gold. Legend has it that this funky substance can be found floating in the sea or rarely washed up on beaches. It was discovered in the 1800s. It's actually formed from the indigestible bits sperm whales gobble up while feasting on squid, like their beaks. Over time, perhaps years, these bits clump together in their intestines, almost like a kidney stone, to create this valuable lump of ambergris. Now, you may ask yourself why a sperm whale's excretion costs way more than your house. But the answer is simple. It just smells good. Okay, it's not good. It smells divine. The aroma ranges from sweet to musky tones, and perfume makers go bananas for this stuff as it helps fragrances last longer. The more a substance called amberin it contains, the pricier it gets. And the color matters too. Black means less amberin, while white packs a punch. Cheaper options opt for synthetic alternatives, but top-notch perfumes go for the real deal. While using ambergris in perfumes is a no-go in the US, the French still adore this magical ingredient. By the way, over $500,000 is not a limit here. Some lucky fishers once scored a chunk of ambergris worth $1.5 million in the Gulf of Aden. Those sperm whales sure have some fancy intestines, huh? Now, next time you go grocery shopping, do not complain about prices, okay? At least you can easily afford any spice out there. Your many times great-grandfather somewhere in the Middle Ages wouldn't believe you that cinnamon and black pepper can be that affordable. Spices were worth their weight in gold and gems, driving the economy like nobody's business. Back in the day, food went bad faster than milk in the sun, so spices were a hot commodity to cover up that not-so-fresh flavor. European nations wanted to control the spice trade, which led to crazy expeditions to India and other Asian lands. The Portuguese, Dutch, French, Spanish, and English were all fighting for spice domination, setting up shop and making a mint along the way. Now, on to the exact prices. Back in 1393, saffron was as pricey as a horse, ginger as much as a sheep, and mace as costly as a cow. And a pound of nutmeg was worth 7 fat oxen in medieval Germany. That black pepper that we take for granted today wasn't just for seasoning. Peppercorns were actually used as currency in Europe. Towns kept their books in pepper. Brides got pepper as part of their dowry, and some landlords even accepted peppercorn rent. May I cover my utility bills this month with this fancy packet of cinnamon, sir? No? What? You think I should go out and get an actual job? Okay. Hey, that's a nice t-shirt, but does it come in purple? What? It'll cost 10 times more in this color? Now, this one may sound insane to modern people spoiled by the variety we've got today, but if the shopping malls we know today existed many centuries ago, that would be a common thing. Making Tyrian purple dye was such a chore that it cost a pretty penny. It's rumored that purple dye was as valuable as silver. This led to purple fabrics becoming symbols of status, with fancy laws dictating who could wear them. Big-shot Roman leaders flaunted their importance by wearing white togas trimmed in Tyrian purple, while victorious generals rocked the grandest toga of them all, solid purple with shiny gold embellishments. Fast forward to the 4th century, and it was basically illegal for anyone in Rome to sport Tyrian purple except for the emperor. That's how exclusive it was. In fact, saying someone donned the purple came to mean they became emperor. The Byzantine Empire took tight control over Tyrian purple production, using it solely for their fancy silk fabrics. Fun fact, if a royal kid was born, they were literally born in the purple. But I digress. Tyrian purple may have been worn by the nobility, but the origins of this fancy dye are far from being noble. It came from the slimy stuff of 3 different sea snails. Each snail made a unique hue. One of them gave us a bluish purple, another one rocked a reddish purple, and there was even a snail that could help make a vibrant red dye. Under the burning sun, among the sand dunes, somewhere in the Sahara Desert, you're walking in search of an ancient treasure. Finally, you find a strange rock in the sand. It's big, looks like a large piece of black coal or rock, but something shiny on its surface makes the rock unusual. This unique find is the oldest thing that has ever been discovered on our planet. This rock was born long before Earth appeared in outer space. The unusual meteorite was found in 2020 in a remote area of the Sahara Desert. Scientists have analyzed the isotopes of magnesium and aluminum on the stone's surface and found that its age is about 4.5 billion years. At the moment, this is the oldest sample of magma from space in history. It belongs to a small protoplanet that didn't have time to form completely. It happened a very long time ago when our solar system was forming. Many huge asteroids were floating in space. Some of them were formed into huge celestial bodies, which later became planets. The big rocky planets were absorbing the smaller ones. The rock was part of a little protoplanet that just began its formation, but another huge asteroid destroyed it. The planet shattered into billions of pieces. Some of them became part of other planets. Some flew outside the solar system, and one piece that had been wandering in space until our Earth was formed. After that, it hit the planet's atmosphere and fell into the territory now known as the Sahara Desert. The rock was discovered in 2020, but the erosion of extraterrestrial rocks shows that it could have fallen much earlier. This ancient thing weighing around 70 pounds has several pieces of different meteorites inside. In simple words, it's a volcanic rock consisting of lava. It has cooled, solidified, and crystallized. That's why you notice the glitter. Scientists hope that further study of the rock will help to learn more about our solar system foundation. The biggest asteroid discovered in the U.S. is the Willamette. Its size is 84 square feet, and its weight is more than 15 tons. This is half the weight of a bus. Several people can fit on the surface of this outer space object. But the coolest thing is that it's not a rock like most meteorites that were found. Willamette is made of nickel and iron. This massive piece of metal was discovered in 1906. Now, the huge rock is kept at the American Museum of Natural History. The largest meteorite ever found is Hoba. It's located in Namibia, and people have never changed its position because it's too heavy. The weight of Hoba is 60 tons. It's heavier than a tank. The next space-related event occurred on February 28 in southwest England. On this day, a huge flash lit up the sky. Then there was a loud crash. Several residents opened the doors of their houses and noticed a black sooty spot on the lawn. They immediately guessed what had happened and reported the discovery to the British Meteorite Observation Network. If you ever find a meteorite, report it to some geological research or space center as soon as possible. The longer a space rock lies on the ground, the faster it loses its value. Rain, dust, snow, wind, scorching sun, all these factors damage the surface of the meteorite. It makes it difficult to study the celestial object. The meteorite found in England looks like coal, but it's way softer and more fragile. It most likely used to contain frozen water. The rock is part of a huge asteroid that plowed through outer space when our solar system hadn't fully formed yet. They found a unique combination of minerals inside the rock. It can help scientists learn more about the origins of the solar system and life on Earth. Now we're heading to Germany, to the small town of Nördlingen. A huge ancient meteorite's hidden here. It's very difficult to notice it unless you know the secret of this town. You're walking along the cozy little streets and looking at the buildings with beautiful architecture. You spend the whole day there and don't find anything that reminds you of a meteorite. To solve the mystery, you need to get out of town. So you climb a high hill and see that the city is located inside a pit. For a long time, locals were sure the house was located in the crater of an extinct volcano. If you look at the houses from a certain angle, you may notice an unusual shining coming from them. In the middle of the 20th century, a group of geologists came here and immediately declared that the crater doesn't look like a volcanic one. The town was built on a huge crater left by a meteorite. The huge celestial body fell here about 15 million years ago. It was so hot that the carbon bubbles inside instantly turned into small diamonds. When people were building this city, they didn't know they were using expensive stones, since the diamonds were hardly visible. The locals never attached importance to the fact that the city walls shine unusually in the sun. Now they believe this place was built from diamonds that had fallen from the sky. Our next stop is in the UK again. This time the rocks are of an earthly origin. The famous Stonehenge. People place circles of rocks here in a certain order. Everyone knows about this archaeological monument, but no one knows the reason for its creation for certain. Another construction built out of mysterious rocks was discovered just 2 miles away. It's called Superhenge. It's bigger, heavier, and takes up more space. Each plate here is 15 feet, which is about the height of 2 floors. Once, the stone stood vertically and formed a huge semicircle. But someone pushed the stones over about 4,500 years ago. It was a college prank. No, not really. That's why they couldn't be detected for a long time. Scientists still can't solve the mystery of Superhenge, but they believe the standing vertical stones were part of some huge monument. Some other amazing rocks are located in the south of Costa Rica. There are big ones, the size of a human, and there are smaller ones, the size of bowling balls. And they all have a perfectly round shape. These giant rocky spheres were created by people. It must have taken years of polishing using stone tools to get the perfect round shape. These balls are incredibly heavy, but can easily roll like a basketball. All the rocks are of a different age. Some of them were created about 2,500 years ago. Most of them are made of molten volcanic magma. Until now, scientists don't know for what purpose these stones were used. They were found in different parts of Costa Rica, near big cities. It's possible that ancient civilizations installed them specifically to show the greatness of local kings. Also, many experts believe the rocks were used as a tool for studying astronomy. The people who knew their purpose of the rocks had disappeared, and the history of the stones was lost along with them. Let's finish our journey with the coolest archaeological find. You're walking through the desert of Peru and climbing a low hill. You look down and notice the surface of the hill is covered with strange lines. You walk far away and see a huge cat on the hill. Such a drawing is called a geoglyph. Its length is around 120 feet, which is about half the size of a Boeing commercial jet. Archaeologists discovered the giant cat in 2020 and found out that it had been created somewhere between 200 and 100 BCE. This huge drawing is part of a mysterious group of different pictures. In addition to the cat, there are other animals, plants, and fantastic figures. All of them were found in the desert of Peru. The kitten was found by chance. Archaeologists didn't see it at first because natural erosion on the hillside had almost erased the silhouette.
You walk along the beach one day, and in the distance, you see something. What? Is that a person made of plastic? You can't believe it! It's a giant Lego man! Several 8-foot Lego men were washed up on beaches, one in 2007 in the Netherlands and another in 2008 in England. Then, a couple more Lego men were found in 2011 in Florida and California. Is there an unknown colony of life-size Lego people hidden somewhere on Earth? Unfortunately, not. So put that vacation to giant Legoland on hold. What you see was a performance by a Dutch guerrilla artist. There was no real reason for doing it. He just wanted to bring some kindness into everyday life. There are 720,000 miles of coastline in the entire world. It's estimated that 31% of these contain beaches. If we consider the ocean's size, we can expect something strange now and then to pop up. But some things could be of good value. There are not so many places other than a bathtub where you'd expect to find a rubber ducky, or maybe in a swimming pool. But there have been many found on many beaches all over the world, and they all relate to a single incident. In 1992, a shipping container fell off its ship along a journey from Southeast Asia to the USA. 29,000 rubber ducks inside the container managed to escape their iron cage, and they began their own journey, following many different currents in the ocean. The first ones were found in Alaska a year later. They had traveled a huge 2,000 miles from their departure point. One scientist took this opportunity to map the journeys of these ducks. It was a rare chance to find interesting facts about how the currents work. Their research found that some ducks also traveled to Japan through the Bering Strait, some moved with ice across the North Pole, and some even passed over the Arctic, where the Titanic sank. Many of them weren't found and continued even longer journeys. They will probably sail the seas for a further 15 years. The last one passed by Greenland and finally arrived in England in 2007. There were even some that were frozen in ice sheets at the North Pole. Who knows, maybe in a million years from now, humans will study these ducks and learn about the interesting details of bathing from our time. In 2018, a couple of beach walkers were enjoying the Western Australian coast one day when they found an old bottle. They thought it looked pretty neat, so they kept it as a nice ornament for their shelf. They then realized there was something inside of it. Taking out what appeared to be something rolled up and dried it out. They were amazed to find that it was a message in a bottle.
Got a thirst for knowledge? We've prepared 4 masterclasses on creating a 2D character animation from scratch, 10 hours of video lessons, practical tasks using professional software, and additional materials that you can use with your own projects.
After seeking professional advice from where it came from, it was an authentic message from a German ship dated 12 June 1886. This holds the record for the oldest message in a bottle. The note relates to a German experiment. Thousands of these bottles were also thrown overboard. It was an experiment and they requested whoever found the bottles contact them. I wonder if 132 years is not too late. In 2012, an 8-year-old boy stumbled across an interesting rock. Taking it home to his parents, they were told it was an ambergris. You likely wouldn't have heard of this. And either way, when they learned, it was called the treasure of the sea and floating gold. It's been used by humans for around 1,000 years to make perfume. This rare element allows the perfume to have a pleasant, long-lasting smell. It was unknown where this magical thing came from for a long time. But today, it's understood that it comes from inside cachalot whales, the leftover material from food that they spit out. But regardless of its disgusting origins, one of these could fetch you a huge $65,000. Not a bad allowance. We all like bubbles in our baths, but one beach in Queensland, Australia, it experiences a massive amount of foam on its beaches every year. But how could this occur? Is it a soapy beach? All seawater contains dissolved salts, fats, proteins, and algae, with some detergents and other materials. And when this water is agitated, it bubbles. If you were to take a bottle of seawater and shake it vigorously, you would get bubbles from just that small amount. So when tropical storms hit the sea at certain beaches, it has the same effect, but on a much larger scale. Iceland is otherworldly and beautiful, and its beaches have rare black sandy beaches. This is because of the constant volcanic activity, but this doesn't make it amazing enough. On the southeast part of the island, icebergs wash up onto the shore as well. These bits of ice break off from one of Europe's largest glaciers, where they've been for thousands of years, and then make their journey south, making Iceland beaches even more beautiful. In 2016, above the Arctic Circle in Siberia, thousands of balls of ice were found lying on the beach. The locals had never seen this before, and the sizes ranged from as small as a tennis ball to the size of a volleyball. It's as though a massive snowball competition was held and then everyone just left. Although a snowball competition in the Arctic Circle does sound amazing. This naturally occurring phenomenon is due to sludge ice forming and binding together with the effects of the wind and water, and gradually build up as they roll in the shallows. The same thing can happen in inland lakes, which also occurred at Lake Michigan in 2013. Driftwood isn't strange on the beach, but their drift logs in other parts of Washington are a whole different story. The red cedar is a typical visitor to the shores, originating north from the Canadian border and then gradually floating southwards. Their sizes reach 200 feet long. The Kraken has been in mythological history for centuries. It was scaring seafaring people, but could you imagine it lying on your beach? One was found in New Zealand. A giant squid was discovered by some local divers who were hoping to go for a swim, until they stumbled across this beast. Although it was 13 feet long, it was only a young squid. adults can reach up to 43 feet. And where there's a young squid, there are probably older ones lurking nearby. A good sign not to go for a swim on that particular beach. In 2009, a container ship left Taiwan and suddenly disappeared without a trace. A massive vessel couldn't be located without contact with its crew. Then, 9 years later, it mysteriously reappeared along the beach of Myanmar. No signs of a crew ever being there or any cargo was on board. It was deemed as a ghost ship, but once it was located, the truth came out that it was scheduled to be dismantled and somehow detached, slowly drifting away on its own voyage. Finding a computer on a beach wouldn't be that much of a find, given the seawater would ruin it. However, a much older computer was found in Greece. The Antikythera computer was found in a shipwreck and is believed to be the earliest computer form. It was made as far back as 200 BCE, much earlier than when Pong became popular. This computer was so advanced with its prediction of astronomical positions that there was nothing like this up until the 14th century. But probably the strangest thing that has been found on a beach is an entire city. Pavlopetri in Greece was once a populous city until it submerged around 1000 BCE. It's one of the oldest underwater cities in the world. What's really fascinating about this place is that it has an almost perfect town plan. You can swim around and check out streets, buildings, and other interesting places.
Now here's something. Baltic amber is one of the most common resins found in the world. The reason for this is that due to the vast forests of pine, their numerous deposits are so common, they provide wonderful treasures from long ago. Ants are especially common in the Baltic amber, which comes from pine trees. Its resin is rich in sugar, so the ants often live amongst the trees, close to the easy source of food. One block found in East Germany has preserved one ant that is estimated to be about 48 million years old. Think of the birthday cake. But what makes this find interesting is another animal inside the amber. It's a mite, notorious hunters in the insect world, capable of traveling at great speed. These guys quickly latch onto their hosts, sucking them dry. They're also capable of destroying entire hives in one go. And within this piece of amber, the amber provides a display of their final struggle. In Southeast Asia, feathers belonging to something unique have been found from 80 million years ago. They were captured in resin during the Cretaceous period, a peak time for dinosaurs. The many feathers inside are from the coelurosaur. It looks like a dinosaur, but this animal is more related to birds. Other feathers like this have been found in resin. They belong to avian and other non-flying dinosaurs. The discoveries have helped reimagine what dinosaurs actually look like. Still, dinosaurs may have had feathers instead of being completely bald. Of course, for most of them, the feathers weren't used for flying, but they helped the dinos stay warm. However, the feathers weren't all that was found, and a part of the coelurosaur's tail is also preserved. Still, it's so small and ancient that its DNA hasn't survived to map their entire genome. The enclosed tail is also very delicate, and it can't be removed from its protective amber shell. But although these findings can only be observed, they've still provided a great insight in the evolution of birds. But how does amber preserve things so effectively, even at the initial stages? The trees produce the resin to protect any small gaps in the bark against feeding insects. Its antiseptic nature and lack of water content ensures it doesn't degrade for a long time. This also makes it more resilient as it petrifies over long periods, eventually becoming a fossil. Some of the oldest amber ever found was from the Triassic period, showing how long it can last. The pieces from Italy are about 230 million years old. And inside one of these ancient droplets holds the oldest arthropod ever recorded. This mite found inside has provided a broader understanding to their evolution. Today, they're known to mainly annoy gardeners by feeding on the petals of flowering plants. However, at the time the mite was caught, flowers didn't have any petals, and it would be without this tasty meal for another 100 million years. Now, 100 million years ago, Myanmar was part of Gondwana, the great supercontinent. At that time, Myanmar wasn't part of Asia yet. But it was still lush with a great forest, which contain many species of lizards that lived amongst the undergrowth, hiding away from dinosaurs. Many of them have been stored within amber. This fact helped discover ancestors of geckos and chameleons. By using CT scans, scientists have analyzed them, providing a glimpse into the formation of their scales, teeth, feet, and claws. It also provided an understanding of how these archaic creatures once appeared. Although mostly pieces of lizards, by using modern technology, the scientists have been able to create 3D images of the lizard. These images can reveal how those guys appeared in their full form. The images show that they still retain some of their exact features to this day, like the chameleon's sticky pads used for climbing. A salamander fossil from around 20 million years ago is one of the most intact specimens ever found in amber. Details of its final moments show that it had been attacked before getting stuck in the resin. However, what's confusing about this find from the Miocene era is that the amber was found in the Caribbean, but it came from a tree that's closer related to those from East Africa. The lizard also has ancestry from the same area. Finds like this have opened a whole new understanding about how these small lizards migrated. It's expected that they would have ridden fallen logs, which took them across the seas to new homelands, not only to the Caribbean, but to all continents except for Antarctica. Nobody goes there, it's too cold. In the Dominican Republic, you can find some of the rarest of all ambers. This Dominican amber came from neotropical forests from around 20 million years ago. Many of the trees that made the resin are now extinct. The amber is almost completely see-through and can come in an array of beautiful colors. The most common colors are red, yellow, and even blue, and are easily mistaken for gemstones. One was found with a flea caught in it, dating to when the forest was at its peak and the mammalian variety thrived. Fleas were likely common at the time, and this flea in particular had recently fed on a mammal before getting stuck. However, something more intriguing was found within the flea. While scientists checked what mammal DNA was within the flea, they found that it was carrying an ancient bacterial blight. These blights have been constant throughout Earth's history, dramatically decreasing populations of animals and plants. This now extinct blight in the amber helped scientists determine how much the bacteria have evolved and how it spread. Now, most remnants of insects inside amber aren't much more than the exoskeleton bodies. But with some found in Myanmar, they were so well preserved that even the color of the insects is still intact. Colors in nature appear in 3 different ways. The first is bioluminescence, that's produced by a chemical reaction within a living organism. The second is about pigments, where the color appears in an animal or plant tissue. The third is called structural coloration, and the production of colors here is explained by microscopic surfaces fine enough to react with the light. The rare insects in amber were found in the form of structural coloration, but only at specific wavelengths. It all explains the very intense colors rarely found. 99 million years later, these bugs can still show their vibrant colors – blue, purple, and green. Some of them appear so different in color and shape that they almost look like they're from another world. Which of course they are, a very old one. Ants have been around for about 168 million years, based on fossil evidence provided. They're well known for their social hierarchies and their hive mind system. They've dominated almost every corner of the insect world, but when these social capabilities came about have been difficult to determine. Yet, recently, amber dated from 100 million years ago has shed some light into their evolution. Several amber pieces have preserved various ant types, including the worker ants, guardian or soldier ants, and even a queen ant. Before these pieces were found, it was estimated their social nature occurred millions of years later. A piece of amber, dated 100 million years ago, helped shed light on the evolution of birds. A perfectly preserved bird that hatched preserved in amber was already equipped with its flight feathers. With the earlier physical abilities, they would be capable of moving around the nest by themselves at a very young age, and it's expected they could search for their own food almost immediately. But as birds continue to evolve and spend more time in the skies, their brain developed larger for their cognitive abilities. After hatching, their early development was then more focused on the brain, and the chicks slowly became more reliant on their parents over time. In Spain, a massive treasure trove of amber and other fossils has been found. Inside, there were remnants of an entire ecosystem that existed 110 million years ago. A bunch of individual fossils were found. The vast collection includes many types of insects, mollusks, arachnids, plants, 50 different dinosaur bone fragments, feathers, and hair from mammals, and a McDonald's burger wrapper. Nah, just kidding. With the abundance of findings, it's helped researchers understand the ancient terrestrial ecosystem that once existed. With loads of specific details of the environment, they've reconstructed the swamp. This way, it's now possible to experience what it was like in the world of dinosaurs.
Back in May 2015, David Hole took his metal detector and went looking for gold. He picked the perfect spot for it. Mayaborough near Melbourne, Australia, was the top location down under during the gold rush in the 19th century. The detector beeped, showing there was something precious hiding in the ground. David found a very heavy reddish rock with a weird, dimpled surface resting in some yellow clay. As it turned out later, the find was, indeed, priceless, but only for science. David took the rock home, hoping he'd be able to open it and find a gold nugget inside. He tried a rock saw, an angle grinder, and a drill, and put the rock in acid. Nothing worked. Not even a sledgehammer did the job. A couple of years later, he decided to take the rock to Melbourne Museum and finally find out what it really was. It turned out it was a meteorite, and a rare one. The geologist working at the museum was over the moon, as after years of looking at thousands of rocks that people had thought to be meteorites, he finally got his hands on the real thing. The space origin of the rock explained why it was so unusually heavy. It contained dense forms of iron and nickel, and those guys weigh a lot. And it got its dimpled surface because it started melting when it plunged through Earth's atmosphere. Scientists named the meteorite Maraborough after the place where it was found, and used a diamond saw to study it better. They sliced off a sliver of the space rock and saw some tiny crystallized droplets of metallic minerals throughout it. Those minerals formed during the early years of our solar system. It means the space guest was around 4.6 billion years old. The researchers are still not quite sure where the meteorite came from or how long it's been on Earth, but they've got some guesses. Our solar system used to be a swirling mix of dust and chondrite rocks. Gravity did its thing and formed planets, but there were some leftovers, and most of them ended up in a massive asteroid belt. The Maraborough meteorite likely took a detour from the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. It got bumped out of there by asteroids crashing into each other, and one fine day, it decided to crash into Earth. Carbon dating says that this space rock has been chilling on Earth for somewhere between 100 and 1,000 years. There were meteorite sightings in the 19th century that could match up with when it made its grand entrance. The scientists say the Maraborough meteorite is even rarer than gold. It's only the 17th meteorite ever found in the Australian state of Victoria and the second largest. In the 80s, David Mazurek from Michigan decided to buy a farm not far from Mount Pleasant. The new property came with a weird bonus, a large rock that kept the barn door open. The farmer explained the rock was a meteorite. It had literally fallen from the sky in the 30s. The farmer and his father found the crater the meteorite had left and dug out their guest from space, which was still warm. They couldn't think of a better use for it than to serve as a doorstop. I mean, what else can you do with a meteorite? The new owner got to keep the unconventional doorstop and must have grown fond of it. When he was moving to a new home, he took the rock with him and used it for the same purpose for another 30 years. Sometimes David would let his kids take it to school. It must have gotten some easy A's in physics and astronomy. Then he heard that other Michigan residents find and sell pieces of meteorites for some serious cash. Since his piece was an impressive 22 pounds, he decided to take it to Central Michigan University to find out its value. A local geology professor was getting tired of similar requests because, for around 18 years, she had to explain to people all the rocks they had brought her weren't meteorites at all. But this time, she felt it was the real thing. She tested the rock and determined it was a meteorite made from iron and nickel. It turned out to be the 6th largest recorded find of this kind in Michigan, and the most valuable specimen she's ever worked with. They sent a slice for another round of verification to the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., and soon it was all official. It turned out that the meteorite was a piece of an early solar system. The Smithsonian and a museum in Maine offered some good money for the space rock. Mazurek decided to sell his meteorite to Michigan State University's Abrams Planetarium for $75,000. He generously shared 10% of the money with Central Michigan University's Earth and Atmospheric Sciences Department, where they confirmed the rock's true identity. I hope the money he was left with was enough to buy a new doorstop. While some use meteorites as furniture, scientists have found a way to utilize them to extract oxygen from water on Mars. Traveling to the red planet is impossible without oxygen. We need it both to breathe and fuel rockets for a return trip to Earth. The new robot, called AI Chemist, hunts down a compound that can kickstart a chemical reaction on Mars to produce oxygen. The compound is crafted from elements found in Martian meteorites. This planet only has traces of oxygen in its atmosphere. But scientists have found there's some liquid water underneath the southern ice cap of Mars and more water under its surface. So, they needed to figure out how to break down this water into its hydrogen and oxygen molecules using materials available on the red planet. The AI chemist analyzed 5 meteorites that either came from Mars or were similar to that of its surface. It used a laser to locate large amounts of iron, nickel, calcium, magnesium, aluminum, and manganese in the samples. These elements will be enough to produce more than 3.7 million possible molecules to break down water and generate oxygen on the red planet. Finding the right algorithm for this process would take us humans around 2,000 years, and the robot managed to do it in a matter of weeks. Using the meteorite compound as a catalyst, the robot managed to do its job in -35 degrees Fahrenheit on Earth, and it did so without any human help at all. Now, the question is, if it will be able to do the same on Mars, where the atmospheric composition, air density, humidity, gravity, and other conditions are trickier than on Earth. Other scientists previously managed to produce small amounts of oxygen fit for breathing up there. An instrument the size of a lunchbox on NASA's Perseverance rover compressed and heated carbon dioxide from Mars's atmosphere. It generated oxygen at around the same speed as a small tree. I think Matt Damon's character from The Martian would have loved all these advances in space science. Thousands of meteorites crash into our planet every year. 95% of them are thought to come from just 2 sources. 75% from the crust of a big asteroid, and 20% from the mantle of an even larger celestial body that bit the dust ages ago. But in May 2020, researchers stumbled upon some meteorite pieces in the Sahara Desert that were like nothing they'd seen before. They were labeled as ungrouped achondrites, a type of rock that formed from melted minor planets way back in the solar system's early days. This makes the find slightly older than Earth itself. But unlike others of its kind, this meteorite was made out of andesite, which made it even more unique. It could serve as proof that the early protoplanets in the solar system and a ton of other debris either got wrecked or joined forces in building the rocky planets we know today.
One guy was walking in the forest of County Park in Huntington, New York. He came to a mysterious small area where he found cans of leftover food and a dirty blanket on the ground. Broken branches lay nearby, folded into a strange shape resembling a cage, and almost every tree had A4 sheets of paper hanging on it. There were about 10 sheets in total. Someone carelessly stuck them to the trunks with duct tape. All these sheets had photos of missing people and some information about their disappearance, a city where a person had vanished, and the local police phone number. The guy got scared and ran away. But before that, he filmed everything on his phone. He posted the video on the internet. And after that, Reddit users started their own investigation. It turned out all those people whose faces were printed on the posters were really missing. The man who discovered this place called the police. Fortunately, the officers quickly found the person who had done this. He threw a Halloween party and decided to hang posters of missing people to create a scary atmosphere. He removed all the photos, and the police stopped the investigation. Do you know these guys standing in the streets and holding a free hugs sign? Oh, it's so cute. They give so many positive vibes to people. And now, imagine you're walking through a dark forest alone, in the fog, and somewhere in the thicket, you notice a small gray house. It's hidden in the foliage and looks like an entrance to a bunker. It has no windows, only a dark doorway leading into the darkness. And you see that someone wrote, "Free Hugs Hut" on the wall. Yeah, not so cute this time. The exact location of this hut is unknown, but it's somewhere in the forests of Wisconsin. In fact, there's nothing terrible inside. Some garbage, dry leaves, cobwebs, and moss. Teenagers or homeless people like to hang out in this hut. Some of them probably had a good sense of humor if they wrote this phrase on the wall. But imagine if a scary, pale old woman had been living there for years. She'd be waiting for you inside to hug you tightly with her long, thin arms. We're in Greenville, South Carolina. There's a forest next to this town. You go there and notice a silhouette of a man. It's a big, sinister clown. You freeze in fear. He's just standing there among the trees and looking at you, smiling. Your knees are shaking. You're sweating. The clown raises his hand and beckons you with his finger. You don't go, and the clown makes a sad grimace. Then he takes some money out of his pocket and shows it to you. You finally return control over your body and run away from the forest as fast as you can. The scariest thing is that there are several such clowns in the woods of Greenville. Many locals have seen them walking among trees, attracting people's attention with green laser pointers. Fortunately, instead of approaching them, residents went to the police station. The clowns called people to an abandoned house in the woods. Officers searched the building, but found nothing suspicious there. Still, locals prefer to avoid the forest. In forests, you can not only see, but also hear something terrible. For example, you can hear people's screams. These sounds come from nowhere, and only at night. They can drive you mad if you don't know their nature. Coyotes live in forests all over North America, Canada, and Mexico. In the winter and spring, these animals howl and scream. Even if one coyote does it, it may seem that several of them have surrounded you. This illusion occurs because there are many different sounds in the forest. Birds, animals, the sound of falling rain, all this mixes with the coyotes howling, and it may seem to you that these animals are everywhere. Also, coyotes can change the tones of their voices and sound like people. Now let's forget about creepy things and find something beautiful in the woods. You're in a wide green clearing surrounded by a dense forest. You approach the thicket and see a hole in it. It's not a huge hollow, but a perfectly round passage. It looks like a portal to a magical land, and it's the creation of a famous Finnish artist named Antti Laitinen. He carefully cut the leaves and branches of the surrounding trees to create the perfect circle. He called it Broken Landscape. Besides this hole, the artist has many other unique works. He almost always deals with nature. He has created similar small circles resembling suns in the dense branches of leafless trees. You don't need to travel all over the world to see them. You can find photos of almost all of the artist's works on the internet. Let's move to the green forests of Scotland. Walking among trees and bushes, you can come across human figures. They stand motionless and faceless and reflect everything around them, quite literally. The famous Scottish sculptor Rob Mulholland made these statues out of plexiglass. This is a special kind of glass that reflects light like a mirror. 6 sculptures make up a large vestige installation. Each figure is in a different pose. They reflect trees, bushes, and grass, merging with the forest. In summer, when everything is blooming, the figures are beautiful. But in early spring or late autumn, they reflect nothing but grayness and lifelessness, which makes them look pretty creepy. The sculptor wanted to show a trace of people who lived in the forests many years ago, when humanity was more connected to nature. At that time, survival strongly depended on the state of forests and harvests, and these statues show this unity with the woods. There's a stunning forest in the south of Japan. There are no strange things there. It's weird by itself. If you look at the forest from a height, you'll see that the trees there grow in concentric circles. There are several of them. The closer to the center of this area, the closer the trees are standing to each other. In the outer row, the trees don't grow densely. The whole area resembles mysterious circular patterns in fields all over the world. But this is not a natural anomaly, but the result of human intervention. In 1973, people planted trees so that they created 10 concentric circles. The main idea of this experiment was to find out how cedars could grow in such circular conditions. The researchers called this place experimental forestry. Surprisingly, the trees began to grow in a convex shape, symmetrically fanning out. This proved that the size of the gaps between the trees greatly affected their growth. Initially, the scientists planned to cut the trees down after the experiment was over, but the place became very popular with tourists. People love to walk along these trails and take beautiful pictures using drones. The next strange finding is in the US. This is Vashon Highway, surrounded by a large forest. In its thicket, you can find an unusual tree with a rusty red bicycle inside its trunk. It looks like it grew into the trunk and became a part of it. Only the handlebars and one of the wheels stick out of the bark. The bike got into this tree in the 50s. One young guy received it as a present for his birthday, but he didn't like its handlebars and rugged wheels. So he just left this present near a bush and never came back for it. The bush turned out to be a young tree. With time, its trunk expanded and grew around the iron body of the bicycle. When locals noticed this, they decided not to remove the bike from the tree. And they did right, since this place became popular among tourists.
Now imagine the scene. You arrive at the airport in Hawaii a bit earlier and decide to chill in the waiting area. Suddenly, you notice an anxious blonde lady in a white dress standing at a gate. She's looking out the window on the runway, waiting for someone's arrival. You reach into your bag for some chocolate to comfort her. But it's too late. She vanished into thin air. Congratulations! You just met the lady in waiting, a resident phantom of the Honolulu International Airport. Like any phantom, she has a grim backstory. The lady once fell in love with a man and he promised to marry her. But then the happy groom flew abroad and never returned to his bride. His betrayal broke her heart and she took her own life. But her phantom is still attached to the airport, and she waits for her man to return just like the famous Japanese dog Hachiko waited for its master. Over the years, the local police have collected numerous complaints about the lady phantom wandering around the gates and other restricted areas of the airport. Also, this entity likes to hang out in public bathrooms, just like Moaning Myrtle from the iconic fantasy novel. Some airport employees reported seeing paper dolls unfolding on their own while cleaning empty bathrooms in the middle of the night. In some cases, toilet seats slam shut and toilets flush by themselves. However, it's unlikely to surprise anyone since many public bathrooms have automatic flushing. Unfortunately, this urban legend doesn't clarify the way to release the heartbroken phantom. But at least this story is a good reminder to think twice before you make any promises. And speaking of spooky ladies in white, the Kempegowda International Airport in India also has one. A pilot once noticed a weird woman in a white sari on the runway. He called the airport workers asking to help her, but she disappeared by the time the staff arrived at the spot. Numerous witnesses have seen the same phantom in other parts of the airport. The lady haunted people in the cargo department, on escalators, and even in the parking lot. According to the media, nobody knows her background or the reason why she's here. Maybe her luggage was lost and she's just trying to get it back. Today, Suvarnabhumi Airport in Bangkok is one of the busiest airports in the world. But it doesn't stop this transport hub from also holding the title of the most haunted place in Thailand. Although imagination tends to draw something old and dusty when we hear the word haunted, Suvarnabhumi is relatively new. It started operating in 2006, but it turned out that the land under the airport used to be an ancient burial site. Work crews had to drain a marshland called Cobra Swamp to prepare the land plot for building. And mysterious events began to occur from the very first days of work. Wailing, creepy screams, and even classic music came out of nowhere. Some builders refused to continue construction because they were too scared of evil forces. The locals believed that they had angered the entities who were sleeping beneath the new airport. That's why 99 Thai monks were invited to perform a ritual. Together, they chanted for 9 weeks to clear all the bad vibes. The ceremony was almost finished, but suddenly a random man interrupted the monks and claimed to be possessed by one of the local entities. His message was pretty clear. You should build a proper spirit house to guarantee the smooth operation of the airport. Having said that, he fainted. Later, the guy woke up feeling normal and conscious. Well, the airport authorities decided to fulfill the mysterious request. Spirit houses are part of Thai traditional beliefs. Landowners build nice tiny shrines to establish friendships with invisible entities who might inhabit their plots of land. So, if you ever find yourself at the Bangkok airport, don't forget to check out this artifact, as well as the churning of the ocean, the remarkable sculptures that depict the ancient Hindu myth. The story is basically about light and dark deities working together to get Amrita, the beverage of immortality. Now, here's another reason why you should think twice before building a transport hub on questionable land. Welcome to Denver International Airport, reportedly one of the most famous haunted airports in the world. It stands on a special isolated plot of land that was considered sacred by its former residents, according to the media. People reported multiple problems and strange incidents going on at the airport from the very beginning of construction. Today, this place attracts numerous mystery hunters, and the number of urban legends around the airport multiplies. Some investigate the hidden meaning behind the local murals and gargoyles. Others believe that the giant cobalt-colored horse statue in front of the airport is haunted. That's because the sculpture, known as Lucifer, took the life of its creator, Luis Jimenez. In 2006, a piece came loose and hit the sculptor while he was finishing his work. The airport's enormous layout and remote location inspire some people to speculate that there's a secret bunker under it. In fact, it's bigger than some real cities like San Francisco, for example. But the spokesman of the airport debunked that myth, saying that this transport hub must support at least 50 million travelers a year, and thus it needs to be huge. Our next destination may inspire you to revisit the Langoliers, created by the legendary horror writer Stephen King. Although the thriller took place at King's hometown airport in Bangor, Maine, we'll be talking about the historic Chandler Airport, located in Fresno, California. This place has many abnormal stories to tell, including reports of people going through the old terminal wall. Some passengers heard disembodied voices in the airport restaurant. The kitchen staff once reported hearing a suspicious noise while cleaning up. They went to see what was going on and witnessed a plate moving across the counter and then falling onto the floor. Perhaps the invisible customer was just upset by overly high food prices. Hey, it could happen. Just like Honolulu Airport, Chandler has a resident phantom. It's an old man in the control tower. Thankfully, this guy doesn't bother anybody. According to witnesses, he's just staring at the field as if he's watching invisible aircraft take off and land. Meanwhile, the urban legend behind Savannah Hilton Head International Airport is spooky and romantic at the same time. It says the following: if you land right after sundown, you'll get the chance to see two phantoms along the north side of the runway. Now, the legend says these are the phantoms of Richard and Catherine Dotson, who used to live on the land underneath the airport. They don't bother the passengers or staff either. It seems like they're just greeting arriving people. Now, our list can't be complete without the UK's Manchester Airport. This busy place serves around 28 million passengers a year and also hosts a few spooky phantoms. Passengers and staff reported seeing creepy figures and weird phenomena, such as doors slamming on their own. The airport archives from the 1970s revealed that some staff refused to show up at Terminal 3 alone after dark because they were too scared. One night, the local workers saw a figure in a pilot's hat entering a toilet. No flights were scheduled to arrive or depart at that time, so he decided to follow the mysterious gentleman. But the bathroom was empty, and the motion-sensitive lights didn't show any reaction to the stranger. Some people reported meeting face-to-face with a phantom of a pilot in an old-school uniform. He usually wanders around Terminal 3 looking disoriented. But unfortunately, no one knows his backstory for sure. Another spooky resident of the airport is the Night Watchman, a phantom of a security guard from the 1960s. A former airport employee once met this gentleman and tried to talk to him, but the figure simply vanished into thin air, leaving the poor guy in shock. After that, he decided to leave his job for good. I can understand that.
Welcome to the Hall of Monsters. I see you are wearing your protective gear. That's good, because during your visit here, your safety is not guaranteed. So, every step you take, beware, for the monsters you'll see ahead are the scariest ones from Japanese folktales. If they don't haunt you during your visit, they sure will haunt your dreams. And let me tell you, no anime you have watched could have prepared you for this. I already see doubt and fear in your eyes. So let's begin our tour before you lose that little flicker of courage left within you. There's no better monster to greet you than the Naparabo. You might not notice it, but it is happy to have new victims. I mean visitors. Naparabo looks like an ordinary human being in almost every way. That is why it can blend in seamlessly with human society. But things will quickly get uncanny once you meet face to face with it. You see, it has no face at all. Its head is like a blank orb. But here's the thing, Naparabo is quite harmless. It only frightens people, that's it. In legends and stories, it usually does that by impersonating someone familiar to its potential victims. And once it has their attention, it causes its features to disappear, almost as if erasing a pencil drawing. What is left is a blank, smooth sheet of skin with no eyes, nose, or mouth. So, as you might have imagined, its true identity and what it really looks like is unknown. One of the stories in which Naparabo appears is about a lazy fisherman. Despite his wife's warnings, he goes fishing from a sacred imperial koi pond. On his way there, he meets another fisherman who also warns him not to go there. Still, he ignores him. Once he arrives at the pond, a beautiful young woman begs him not to fish there. But he doesn't listen to her either. That is when she wipes off her face. When the fisherman runs home to hide with fear, his wife confronts him and criticizes him for his wrongdoing. Plot twist, only to wipe her face as well. Speaking of fish and ponds, let's move on to Cup Fa. Don't fall for their rather funny and mascot-like appearance. Cup Fa is a dangerous monster you wouldn't want to cross paths with. These creatures, which are often depicted as humanoid turtles, live in and around water bodies such as lakes, ponds, or rivers. Kupfas are generally the size of a human child, yet they are physically stronger than a grown man. Their skin color can vary from different shades of green to bright red and even blue. In addition, they can either be slimy or covered in scales. As unique as each Kupfa can be, they all have a turtle shell on their back and a mouth resembling a beak. Their arms and legs are webbed between the toes and fingers, but the most characteristic part of their appearance is the bowl-like objects that lie on top of their skulls. This is considered to be the source of Kupfa's power and life force, and must be kept filled with water at all times. If this water spills or the bowl is damaged in any way, a Kupfa can become incredibly weakened and will be unable to move. Kupfas are known to cause mischief. Although they can befriend humans, you should always approach one with caution, because they might try to lure you into the water to feed on you. However, there's also a chance they might challenge you to a sumo wrestling match. Just know that they are really good at it before accepting this challenge. Yet again, if you do find yourself in a match, here's a pro tip. Find a way to trick the Kupfa into bowing so low that the water in its dish spills out. And hey, if you refill that water later, you can bring the creature under your command. Take a look at this lady here. She seems to be sleeping peacefully, right? Well, look again. There's something strange going on with her neck. Rokurokubi might appear as an ordinary woman by day, but when it's nighttime and her body is asleep, her neck stretches to incredible lengths and roams around freely. Although Rokurokubi is no less creepy than the other creatures, there is something that makes her different. It is that, unlike others, she is actually not born as a monster. She used to be a human being just like us, but she was transformed by a curse resulting from some evil action or misdeed. But the story gets sadder, because the mentioned misdeed doesn't necessarily have to be her own doing. In many cases, it is either Rokurokubi's husband or father who actually committed evil actions. But she's the one paying the price because the curse only affects women. If you think Rokurokubi cannot be that harmful or scary with that heartbreaking backstory, then you're right. Her head might attack small animals sometimes, or she might cause mischief by scaring nearby people. But that's mostly it. What she loves to do in her night travels, however, is to lick up lamp oil with her long tongue. Well, who are we to judge someone's favorite food? Nukakubi is Rokurokubi's much scarier sister. She is like an advanced version of her, sort of like an upgraded Pokemon. While Rokurokubi's head is always attached to her body, Nukakubi's head can come off from the neck and float around far and away from her body. The worst part is, though, she can get bloodthirsty sometimes, and that's when her detached head will start preying on humans to quench that thirst. However, she is not invincible. It is believed that if her body moves by any chance while it is sleeping, and her head is still floating around as that happens, then her head cannot return back to the body. Hope that comforts you a bit. You see a roll of cotton. I see a life-threatening monster. According to Japanese folktales, especially the myth of Tsukumogami, inanimate objects receive a soul, therefore become alive and self-aware after serving their owners for 100 years. Although they are usually harmless, they might tend to play small pranks on people. Yet again, they still have the capacity to get angry and vengeful, especially if there are people who threw them away or didn't treat them well. They might group up to take revenge. Itan Momen is one of those object monsters. These possessed long and narrow sheets of cloth which were used to make clothes, can be seen flying through the night sky. They are often malicious and attack people by wrapping their bodies around a person's face and neck, strangling or smothering them. In some tales, it is said that wrapped cloths would spin around and around and quickly come flying to wrap themselves around people and take them away to the skies. Joker's laughter is gonna sound like music to your ears once you hear this lady's. Waruhion is a female-looking monster that lives in the mountains, but despite her non-threatening appearance, meeting one will actually put you in a really dangerous position. She will smile and start laughing at you, and once she does, you'll realize that her laughter is somewhat toxic and infectious. It will cause you to start laughing along too, but even if she leaves, you will continue laughing after her until you are out of breath and unable to stand. Even if you were strong enough to resist laughing along with her, you would still not be safe. You see, merely hearing her laughter, no matter how far away she cackles, is enough to put you in a stupor. You'll be haunted by that annoying and ear-piercing sound wherever you go, for the rest of your life. However, it's not like anybody who travels through the mountains will meet her. There is one way to avoid this laughing curse altogether. You see, she appears to people only on the 1st, 9th, and 17th day of each month. So, plan your travels accordingly.
You're hiking in the wilderness, looking for a safe spot to set up camp. All you can hear are leaves and branches cracking under your footsteps. Some squirrels are running up a tree over there. But suddenly, something unexpected happens. You notice something weird in the distance in between the trees. It kind of looks like a concrete structure of some sort. Weird. At this point, you're at least 20 miles deep in the woods, and there are no nearby towns or villages, as far as you know. So you decide to go off the trail with your friends to get a closer look. But as you get nearer, you realize that it's actually a 12-foot-tall staircase, and it's leading to nowhere. What's it doing there in the middle of literally nowhere? And it doesn't even lead to anything. You put on your Sherlock Holmes cap and investigate. So maybe there used to be an old house or mansion here that collapsed over the years, and the only thing left is this staircase. But weirdly enough, after circling the bizarre structure, you realize there's no trace of any ruins or even foundations. It's like someone just sliced a staircase off their house, cake style, and plopped it here for no reason. Okay. You and your friends aren't really into getting a whole lot closer. Something feels wrong. The longer you look at this weird structure, the more you feel a super creepy presence. Something tells you you should probably leave the area as fast as possible. You can't explain the feeling or take your eyes off the creepy staircase. You take out your phone and snap some pictures. Then, after a lot of hesitation, you take a few steps closer and notice that the stairs don't seem to be all that ancient, a few decades old at best. There's moss growing out from some cracks. Your friends have had enough. They ditch you and run back off to the trail, leaving you alone on the staircase. You put your foot carefully on the first step. Wham! Adrenaline rush. As you ascend to the top, someone touches your shoulder. You jump and turn around. All you see is black. As weird as this sounds, discoveries of random staircases illogically found in the woods are surprisingly common. Some are made of wood, others are bricks or stones. Some look ancient, while others look like they were finished yesterday. The one thing they all have in common, they all lead to absolutely nowhere, and they're all found in super mysterious locations. One of the most famous ones is in Chesterfield, New Hampshire. A long medieval-looking staircase made of stones with Roman arches in the middle of the woods. It's believed to have been part of Madame Antoinette Sherry's castle. She was a big singer back in Paris. The castle dates back about 100 years, and it was later discovered again in 1962. This time, there was nothing but a staircase. Another mysterious ancient staircase dates back to 9,000 years ago. It's in a forest in Italy. It looks like a series of stairs that led to a tiny platform at the top. Why go through all the trouble of building the thing if it leads to nowhere? Well, some experts think it could have been some sort of ritual tower, but your guess is as good as theirs. Some of the more modern staircases found in the woods also have an added bonus. They come with their own urban legends. Gee, would that be a 2-story or 3-story staircase? One of the most popular stories comes from the Philippines, where a forest ranger called Torkik allegedly went out on one of his routine patrols to look for missing people deep in the local jungle. That's where he claims he found some seriously out-of-place stone staircases. They even had weird markings on them. To get a better look at what was around him, he decided to climb up one of them. Just then, he was approached by a vicious stray dog that forced him further up the stairs. A few hours later, he came back to the village. Only thing was, he had been missing for 5 years. Was that staircase a time-traveling portal? Another account allegedly dates back to the 1940s, around the time of the Roswell UFO mystery. A man who claimed to be a scientist was sent to assist in investigating one of the many animal-related cases that kept popping up. Little did he know, This 1 to 2 week investigation would end up lasting 6 months. His team encountered a random wooden staircase in the woods that seemed to emit some type of frequency. They camped around 100 feet from it that night, but the next morning it vanished. All that was left was a black burn mark where the staircase was. 2 days later, it reappeared out of nowhere, 160 feet from its original location. The team wanted to get a sample of the wood to send it off to the lab. There was one problem. No matter how hard they tried, it was impossible to chip off a piece. The wood from the staircase was apparently indestructible. These weird mystery stairs have been around since ancient Cambodia. Right in the middle of the jungle is an abandoned 2,000-foot-long staircase leading to, nowhere. According to experts, this staircase was built about 1,000 years ago. They don't know for sure, but they think it led to an ancient city. Sadly, over the years, that city is now completely covered by the dense jungle. Maybe it was an important meeting spot for travelers and merchants coming from all over the continent. Well, back to your story. You feel a strange presence behind you. You turn around, probably one of your friends snuck up on you or something. But then you realize there was no one behind you. You're the only one around. You freak out. Something is definitely wrong here. So you rush down the stairs and bolt back to your friends, panting and startled. You start to tell your friends what happened, but they don't believe you. They think you're just trying to scare them even more. But the emotion on your face, it looks legit. There's real panic in your eyes, the kind you just can't fake. Shadow or wind or whatever that thing was, your fear's real. You all agree that you should stay away from the stairs, and it's probably best if you go back home. Right now. I guess camping out there overnight just wasn't meant to be. As soon as you get home, you open your phone and check out your gallery. But no, you scroll through photo after photo. The staircase, it isn't there. None of the pictures have any staircases in them. Just a small, flat clearing with nothing but trees around, no weird shadows, nothing. Your friends have the same experience. Your eye twitches and you look over your left shoulder. You're in the safety of your own home, but you suddenly feel the same presence you felt on that staircase. Oh no! Everything goes black. But you can relax. Most of these stories are just urban legends, told to give you the heebie-jeebies. The internet has a way of spreading rumors faster than the speed of light. Most of these stairs might have even been built on purpose just recently. One weekend woodshop project, a couple of photos, and you too could be a sensation on every urban legend website. Then you just tear it down, take a photo to show it magically disappeared, and just like that, you're an internet superstar. But let's say you find some real stairs on your weekend camping trip. They're most likely